Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. So happy to be here with you. I am coming to you from Nashville today. It's Memorial Day weekend, and it's a really nice kind of quiet time here in Nashville. Everybody's kind of out of town, and so it's really, really nice to be able to spend this afternoon with you, this Saturday afternoon, to give thanks for all of the opportunities that we have in our individual lives to be able to access higher levels of consciousness, to develop ourselves as souls, and ultimately to serve our world. So I really, really salute you for taking this time out of time here to enjoy this material and to bring it in. I really hope that what we're going to present today is helpful for yourself in your own ascension process, as well as I know many of you are teachers in your own right, and you are influencers of others and guides for others. And I hope that what we offer today will be able to help you to provide some new insights and maybe some clarity for those that you touch. So thank you very much. Now, there is a chat button at the bottom of the page that you're going to be able to ask questions to, and I'm going to be able to refer to those as well when we get to the end of the day today. So I'm going to try and see those questions during the break as well. I'm planning on talking for about an hour and a half or so for this first section. Then we'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll resume for the second half of our presentation today. So thank you very much once again for being here. So our promise is that we're going to be looking at ascension teachings and light body empowerment of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Padmasambhava, who is known as the second Buddha, and Yesha Shogyal, his female Buddha, as well as St. Francis and Clare of Assisi. Francis was known as the second Christ, and Clare, second Magdalene as well. So what we've just done here is something really unique, I think, in ascension studies, is we've established a timeline, an ascension timeline that takes us back to approximately 1300 BC, the reign of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, the famed 18th dynasty of Egypt. And we're going to carry that forward then up until the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. What we're going to appreciate along the way is that Akhenaten and Nefertiti met tremendous resistance when they launched their religious revolution in ancient Egypt. They were met by resistance by the government and by the military. It was just too much of a rapid change at the time. And so actually, as we'll see, the Egyptian authorities went to great lengths to erase all references to the existence of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun. It was quite a dramatic scenario where they're trying to virtually eliminate any knowledge of this person whatsoever. Very extraordinary. Then what we find is that the Essenes come along approximately 1,000 years later, and it is thought reacquired some of the teachings of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. It's controversial, but there's a lot of evidence to support this linkage, that they retrieved this lost ancient Egyptian mystery school teaching about ascension given by Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And we all know what happened, of course, with the Jesus Revolution. Met also with tremendous resistance. And attempts were made to eradicate all of the original teachings of Jesus, substituted religion out Jesus. That they were eliminating was knowledge of ascension and how to attain the ascension. Very critical knowledge that the powers that be, the cabal, if you will, does not want ordinary individuals to have this knowledge. And they've gone to great lengths over these intermittent thousands of years to eliminate these teachings. After the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, we're going to jump forward to 800 BC and investigate, explore the story of Padmasambhava, the Indian mystic guru, teacher, who went to Tibet and taught what was known as the rainbow body of light, another ascension teaching. Just 400 years after Padmasambhava, we will find the story of Francis of Assisi, who lived in Italy, who trained with the Cathars of southern France, who maintained that they had reclaimed the lost ascension teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So there's our reference point going back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene and also connecting once again with Akhenaten and Nefertiti. We're going to explore the relationship between Francis and Claire, some of the things that they were doing to attain their ascension. And along the way, we'll cross-reference these four different mystic couples, these immortal couples, if you will, and interlink their teachings and try to come up with a kind of a comprehensive picture, if we can, of what it was that they've been doing all of these centuries and what have they been trying to communicate or transmit through the ages in terms of each individual's ability to attain their own ascension. So that's our goal. That's what we're looking to do. And I ask the question here, are you ready to experience an intimate connectivity to your enlightened self? Because that's what these teachers offer to us, ultimately. That's what their story is about. It's about uniting the inner male and female within us and connecting with the divine child that is the offspring of our inner male and female. That divine child is our higher self, our awakened self, our enlightened self. And that is something we're gonna see over and over again in some of the art that we examined today. So we're going to look at my latest findings that I hope will put you in spiritual alignment with history's greatest avatars. And we'll explore why and how their lives are model pathways to ascension. So here we go. I want to begin today with a sort of a portal. When Claire and I led a group to Italy in 2015, we went there to experience the Shroud of Turin, when it went on display in Turin, Italy throughout the year of 2015. And along the way, we stopped in Florence, went to the Uffizi Gallery, where I was just mesmerized by this painting by Sandro Botticelli. It's the Coronation of Mary. The Coronation of Mary, the Virgin. But in esoteric Jewish studies, we think of Mary as representative of the Marys. There wasn't just a Mary, not just a Mary Magdalene, not just a Virgin Mary. There were Marys, plural, who were trained in the Essene mystery schools and adopted this title of the Mary, the beloved one, in other words. And so what we see here are several angels who are crowning Mary with this golden crown. The baby Jesus sits on her lap. And what we notice is that Mary is wrapped in a rainbow-colored or multicolored shawl. And we see this luminous halo being placed on top of her head while these angels surround her. Jesus points to a book that is actually the title of the painting, which is the Magnificat. The Magnificat. The title of the painting derives from the word Magnificat, which is written in the book, held by Jesus and the two angels, and is part of a prayer that's found in the Gospel of Luke. The prayer begins, "My soul magnifies the Lord. My soul magnifies the Lord." The Lord, in this case, can be thought of as the divine manifesting power, the creative impulse, the divine intelligence of the universe. We're not referring to an individual here, an individual Lord, rather an all-pervasive divine manifesting power. And so what the Magnificat is telling us is that is the purpose of our soul, is to magnify this divine magnifying or manifesting power. When you look up the word magnify in the dictionary, it means enlarges, boosts, enhances, maximizes, amplifies, expands, and glorifies. Now, the word glorify means to glow rays. And so it's telling us that our soul magnifies the Lord. And perhaps one way that we know when we do that is we're actually glowing rays. Our soul is radiating light. And this is a concept that is, of course, intertwined with the idea of ascension. We are awakening the power of our soul, and we are ascending as humans by tapping into this divine manifesting power and radiating this light or power into the world among us. Just like the lens magnifies an image. Very important word as we continue, the word image. So what we see here is that Mary is actually magnifying this divine light, this divine radiating or magnifying power that is coming from a hidden realm, as portrayed here by Botticelli. At the very top of the painting, you can see this hidden sun, this dark sun, if you will, that's coming out of this dark area in the painting. Just around the head of her, you see a radiant halo, and you also see blue sky. The blue sky turns to blue, and then it goes to a darker blue, and then a lighter blue, and then a darker blue once again. What this is showing is that we're going into the unknowable realms of her consciousness, and that this light is in fact coming from perhaps an unknowable source to humans. It's an otherworldly, other-dimensional light, if you will. And we see that the Virgin, Mary, is being dressed by the sun with 12 crowns of the apocalypse. 12 crowns, 12 starry crowns are being placed on her head. And these are the crowns of the apocalypse. So an important word here for us is that word apocalypse. What does it mean? People traditionally think it has something to do with the end of the world or something of that nature. But according to esteemed Yale divinity scholar John C. Collins, who wrote a book called The Apocalyptic Imagination, an introduction to Jewish apocalyptic literature, he says the word apocalypse is actually a genre of revelatory literature with narrative framework in which a revelation is mediated by an otherworldly being to a human recipient, disclosing a transcendent reality which is both temporal insofar as it envisages eschatological salvation or an end-of-the-world scenario, and spatial insofar as it involves another supernatural world. So what's happening here is that Mary is actually opening up her consciousness to receive a communication from another worldly being, from a supernatural world. That is what an apocalypse actually means. And so summarized, an apocalypse is when an awake or psychically attuned human receiver receives a transmission from a supernatural being from a supernatural world. One of the most distinctive features of the apocalyptic literature, says Christopher Rowland in his book, The Open Heaven, a study of apocalyptic in Judaism, early Christianity, is the conviction that the seer could pierce the vault of heaven and look upon the glorious world of God and his angels. This is expressed by the term, the heavens opened. As for example, during the ascension of Jesus, or the belief that a door opened in heaven in the book of Revelation. And all of these openings of the gates in heaven enable the seer to look into heaven, to watch the goings on, and to gaze upon its secrets. These are what I refer to as the pathways to ascension. And what I'm going to show you as we move forward now is that in example after example that we're going to talk about, Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Shogial and Padmasambhava, and St. Francis and Clare were all apocalyptic figures, in that they had awakened their consciousness and were able to connect with otherworldly spiritual beings and receive what we today would call a download. They opened a hole in space, a hole in their consciousness, connected with this divine being, and brought down a revelatory teaching about open pathways or gateways to ascension. And this, I'm suggesting, is what is happening in Botticelli's painting, is that Mary is receiving this crown of expanded consciousness and is reaching into, with her consciousness, this otherworldly realm where she is communicating with supernatural beings in that supernatural realm to receive a revelation. Now, when we apply what we just saw to this beautiful example of the coronation of Mary, we see Jesus with his hands on Mary's open crown chakra, transmitting to her powerful knowledge. And what I'm suggesting is that this could not only be just Mary, the mother, this is also Jesus and Mary Magdalene. in an episode, for example, out of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, when Mary connects with or has an experience with the resurrected Jesus. She's experiencing an apocalypse. She has opened up her consciousness, and she is connected with this resurrected man, her husband, Jesus in this case, who has now gone on to a supernatural realm, who has returned to transmit sacred knowledge directly into Mary's consciousness. So she is actually opening her own pathways to ascension here. We have an angel standing beside, watching everything. This is one of the Seraphim angels. We know that because of the flame coming out of the top of their head. That is a shorthand way to express that we're dealing with a Seraphim angel, the highest order of angels, beings of pure light and pure love. They have flames coming out of their crown chakra because they burn with the love of the Creator. Very powerful concept. There's another one over on the other side of Jesus as well. So here what we're seeing is this transfer of this apocalyptic knowledge of the pathways of ascension from Jesus to Mary. He's literally tuning her consciousness into this higher realm. And you note that they both wear robes with stars all over them. These are the star cloaks, or the robes of light of the ascended beings. And so this is what we see in this detail here of Mary, once again, receiving this divine vibration, this sacred knowledge from Jesus. Now, the idea is that these pathways to ascension that she's opening could be into other realms of the cosmos. Our universe is referred to as the cosmic web. This is a NASA image. Each yellow dot that we see is a galaxy. The purple streams represent dark matter, which is about 99% of the universe, which is all unknown. And this image, according to NASA, represents 0.00001% of the known universe. So this tiny image contains a massive amount of space out there, with perhaps billions of galaxies being represented in this cosmic web. Maybe this is what Jesus is attuning her to, as he's opening up her pathway, as he opens up Mary's pathways of ascension. Could it be that she is learning about this stellar knowledge and how, at the time that she comes out of her body, how to navigate the interconnecting passageways amongst all those billions of galaxies in the known universe? This is another NASA image of many millions of galaxies, as seen in the Millennium simulation at the Theoretical Astrophysical Observatory, who creates supercomputer simulations of the entire universe. So what we're seeing again is the cosmic web with all these interconnecting filaments with galaxies along the way. It highly resembles a local picture of galaxies, or even neurons within the brain. This is the idea of as above, so below, as within, so without, reflected in this incredible concept. Here we see reconstructed white matter fiber tracts of the brain, brainstem, and spinal cord, with all the offshoots as well. And we can just well imagine what is happening to Mary's own brain as she's receiving this divine light from this supernatural realm. Interesting thing here is that artists have, we now know from studies, artists have structurally different brains compared with non-artists. This is a recent study from April 2016. It says that participants' brain scans are in areas relating to fine motor movements and visual imagery. I'm bringing this up here because when I show the art that I show in our presentation today, we'll look at throughout, people always wonder, well, where did these artists get these ideas? Where did they get these inspirations? Were they told what to paint? Did they see these images, or what? And my answer is, in most cases, these are visionaries, but in a lot of cases as well, they are commissioned and they're told what to paint. But a keystone of our presentation today is that the sacred art that we're going to be looking at actually begins to wire your brain differently than others who don't have access to this art. This is an idea that is expressed in tradition after tradition over thousands of years. And I actually use it as a spiritual practice because I firmly believe that our brain can be programmed like a piano being played by art. That the art itself, the images that we're going to be looking at here of the pathways to ascension and these divine couples, will actually stimulate our brain and our own interior pathways to ascension. This research I'm describing here was published in Neuroimage, and it suggests that an artist's talent could be innate, but it also says that training and environmental upbringing also play crucial roles in their ability. So this is telling us that all of us, our brains are elastic, and they can in fact be changed by this art. We can actually develop denser connections among our synapses and our brain's passageways by studying sacred art. It's a powerful technique of spiritual advancement. And the idea, as the Buddhists teach, is that if you are deeply focused on an image, be it of the Buddha in the awakened state, Mary Magdalene, or the Mother Mary receiving a crown of apocalypse, there is a moment as you're looking at these images, as we're going to show here, when the forepart of your brain becomes so connected that the thought you are thinking about as you look at the painting can literally become your experience. And that's really powerful. That is an absolutely extraordinary concept to think that as you're sitting at your computer screen right now, you're actually stepping into another world. You are participating in this image when Jesus is crowning Mary. And the idea is that as she is receiving that crown, a part of your consciousness is also imagining, beginning to connect with what it must feel like to have such a plasma crown placed on your head, or what it must be like to be able to expand our consciousness to be able to perceive both the outer world and its pathways, as well as the inner world. So I offer this introduction to you that these images that we're showing are more than just nice pictures. They are actually pathways in and of themselves. And I'm extrapolating here on research that was done at UCLA by V.S. Ramachandran, a neuroscientist, who found that we all have mirror neurons in the neocortex, the frontal cortex of our brain, in the human anterior cingulate, as it's called. These are the neurons which normally fire when a patient is poked with a needle. They're called pain neurons. Ramachandran found that these same neurons will fire when the patient watches another patient being poked. And the idea here is that these mirror neurons, it would seem, dissolve the barrier between myself, yourself, and others. The idea is that the brain can't tell the difference between a real and an imagined experience. If I'm watching something happening on a TV screen or a computer screen, it's as if it's also happening to me at the same time, at a lower level. And the idea is that if we can learn to amplify this ability, that we can begin to mirror the people that we see, including the avatars that we see in this sacred art. In Tibetan sacred tradition, they refer to this as ekagrata. Ekagrata. It's a practice of one-pointed focus or meditation on sacred images. And the idea is that if you can connect mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally with the image of the meditating Buddha, your body will begin to match or mirror what the Buddha is doing, and you will be able to experience what the Buddha is experiencing. Ekagrata, again, is the name. The Tibetans call it merit. This is a photo I took on the wall at the Rubin Museum in Manhattan. It's the Rubin, of course, is one of the greatest Tibetan art museums in the world. It's, in my opinion, it's the greatest Tibetan temple in the world. And next to one of the paintings or tankas on the wall, it says that in Himalayan cultures, merit is an overarching purpose for commissioning, creating, dedicating, and using religious objects. Tied to the concept of karma, merit is an investment in the future that can bring results in this life or the next. It is said that merit can be gained by just looking at sacred images. Some objects are commissioned and dedicated to ensure fortunate rebirth in the next life on behalf of deceased loved ones, or to amass positive potential for the long life of a living person. What they're saying here is that sacred art can program our body, our consciousness, and I even extend that out to the light body. And this is why they said that, hey, if you commission sacred art, you're going to have good karma, because you're going to create a pathway through which others can then access the divine realms. This isn't just why Claire and I, for example, have gone about collecting a massive collection of sacred light body art in particular, but because it's about sharing this experience with others and opening up these pathways and knowing the value and the power of this sacred art. The key is to become absolutely present with the images that we're going to be seeing here in the next few hours. So much so that you become one with the images, as if it's being superimposed on your being, and you merge with it. This is when the metaphysics of the experience of just looking at the art on your computer screen, or maybe even putting it on your cell phone, for example, turns into the physics, the neuroscience. Our thoughts and emotions become the body. The metaphysical turns into, or transforms into, and becomes the physical. So this is what we're going to be doing here as we go forward looking at these images. We're actually offering pathways for your thoughts and emotions to reach out and find models that you can mirror, so that then you can concentrate on, become present with, and then literally merge with or become. One of the people who did this that we're going to be discussing today is, of course, St. Francis of Assisi. In his famous life story, his journey took a dramatic turn in the fall of 1205 when, in a vision of a speaking crucifix, a painting of the crucified Jesus spoke to Francis and told him to go repair my church, which you see is falling completely in ruin. Francis's story of this crucifix speaking to him and setting him up on this journey demonstrates the power of art, especially sacred art, and how it has an extraordinary, even supernatural power. And the idea that a piece of art, in this case a painted crucifix, could transmit a holy message or a sacred spiritual energy, in this case to Francis, actually became the core idea of Renaissance art. It's a little out of our discussion today, but Claire and I did a program on Gaia TV called Arcanum, where we looked into the specifics of the Renaissance belief and the power of sacred art to draw down the powers of the heavens, and how Renaissance artists such as Botticelli, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Fra Angelico, and others encoded the secrets of light body activation in their sacred art. Dr. Mario Martinez is a Nashville psychologist who has shown that a woman in California exhibited the stigmata marks of crucifixion after obsessively reading about the crucifixion. So this again goes to our idea that the brain can open passageways to other selves through concentration, through concentrated effort and meditation. He proves this by showing that the medieval stigmatics showed wounds on the palms of their hands because all the paintings in the Middle Ages, or the medieval times, were based on cultural beliefs. And these paintings showed wounds on the palms of Jesus's hand. Then science showed that Roman crucifixion specialists bypassed the main artery and hit a nerve in the wrist to ensure maximum agony, which lasted for days and was the purpose of the crucifixion. Now, current era stigmatics show the wounds in the wrist because of cultural beliefs. And as Dr. Martinez says, the formula is that where the mind goes, the biology follows. So as we're looking at the images, as we go forward here, bear in mind that these are passageways that are connecting your brain to a new level of mind, the quantum level. Then you are now going to be living your life from the perspective of the soul and the light body, because that's what the quantum level is all about. And the quantum model tells us that all potential realities already exist in this present moment. This means that your future light body, your ascended self, already exists. We just have to choose it. And rather like the story of Michelangelo choosing the horse from the block of marble, we manifest it. You remember that story when the apprentice said to Michelangelo, how are you going to sculpt a horse out of that block of marble? And he said, well, I'm going to look at that block of marble and I'm going to remove everything from it that doesn't have to do with a horse. And this is how we attain our ascended or light body as well. We look at our life and remove everything from our life that doesn't have to do with the attainment of the light body. Back to the brain just for a moment and conclude this introduction and start looking at the story of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The epigenetic model of brain science says that you can change your body by thought alone. The theory of neuroplasticity says you can change your brain by thought alone as well. And interactions with sacred images is a form of dreaming and rehearsal for what is to come. And in the case of St. Francis of Assisi, after he has the encounter with the speaking crucifix, he has an encounter with Jesus as a seraphim, as a winged Christ angel. The images that we're going to look at show how the great avatars exist, and they show us our next level of being. And what we're going to actually be doing today is opening pathways that align with our future selves and our future destiny. And so as you contemplate, meditate, and reflect on the images you're about to see, recognize that you're actually retraining your brain to make new connections or new pathways to your new ascended self or your actual self. And as your nerve cells fire in response to the light of the images, they wire together or weave together a web of light that becomes the fabric or canvas for your new body of light, your ascended self. And as you paint this canvas, you actually are visualizing the actual experience of the light body and fabricating a new life. This is what I refer to as ascension intelligence. We'll refer to this concept as we go, and so I won't have to repeat what we've just discussed, but we can just say this is part of ascension intelligence, and you'll know what I mean. The goal of connecting these ascension pathways as we're doing is to put on our robe or garment of light. And in resurrection images and Christian art, you'll see Jesus wearing this starry garment or garment of light. It's called the robe of glory, the robe of light, the resurrection garment. In Tibet, it's referred to as the rainbow body of light or the perfected body, the robe of light, robe of glory. These are all interchangeable terms for this next level of our ascended self. It's what we're all going for. And the idea here is that this light body is a vibration. It's not an actual physical cloak, of course. It is a vibration of a level of frequency. So let's stop here for a moment at this image of on Easter morning. It's a Nolo Me Tangere, do not touch me images, as they're called. It's Easter morning. Mary Magdalene has come to the tomb and she sees the resurrected Jesus in his star cloak or star body. And what he's in the process of doing here is transmitting the vibration of this resurrection body to his beloved Mary Magdalene. It's a very delicate, very beautiful image of the two of them, but it's also, when we look in the detail here, we see the star cloak and we see the radiant crown around Jesus's head as well, with light rays projecting from it. What Jesus is doing at this moment is transmitting to Mary the frequency of the next level of vibration that he has gone to dwell in, the kingdom of heaven, if you will, one of the terms for it. And Mary, looking at her eyes, they are up and in, indicates that she is in a place of ecstasy And opening her hands here, she is ready to receive this vibration into her open crown chakra. So this is kind of the archetypal image of all the sacred couples that we're going to be looking at here. It's about the transfer or transmission of this vibration. And it's not always the case that it's the awakened male that transmits it to the awakened female. Very often it's the other way around. And the Gnostic Gospels make a pretty good case, actually, that Mary Magdalene was, in fact, the ringleader, if you will, of the Jesus Revolution. She was the great alchemist, one of the great knowledge giver who initiated Jesus. And his mission on earth of showing us the way of salvation, which means the way to attain the light body, was very much a joint effort between the two of them. Now, another thing that we want to ask here is that how do we achieve this light body? Well, one way is by concentrating and meditating on the image that we just took a look at, meditating on that. Imagine what it would feel like, and I'll return to that image as we're speaking here. Imagine if you're using this on a daily basis as an open eye meditation. What if you can feel what Mary Magdalene is feeling at this moment? What if your consciousness begins to be activated in your own pathways? How would that change your life? What do you suppose that did for Mary Magdalene at that moment? How did it change her life? And as you begin to imagine answers to that question, I would recommend doing the things that you believe that she ultimately started to do after this moment. So maybe later you'll use that as a meditation, is to think, well, what was it that Mary Magdalene received at this moment? How did it change her life? What did it mean to her? And how would I feel if I were on the receiving end of that vibration? What would that vibration call me to do? What new things would I begin to do mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally that I'm presently not doing as a result of that experience? Something to think about. Another answer to that question is related to the question of how we achieve this light body. We're told in the Gnostic Gospels, the robe of glory and the hymn of the pearl, for example, that Jesus compares this robe that he is transmitting the vibration of to Mary to a pearl. The formation of a pearl begins when a foreign substance slips into an oyster between its mantle organ and its shell, which irritates the mantle. The mantle covers the irritant with layer upon layer of a material called nacre. And like the pearl, the robe or mantle of light is formed by layer upon layer of acts of love. The more acts of love, the more layers to your robe of light. No acts of love, no robe of light, in other words. So here's another suggestion of how to open these pathways to ascension. Acts of love, acts of benevolence, acts of compassion. In fact, compassion in action, the Tibetans say, is the key to attaining the light body. So this is how we open up some of these pathways within our consciousness, within our body, within our lives. And we ultimately attain, through these acts of love and through these open passages and pathways, what the Tibetans refer to as the rainbow body of light, the ascended body, the glory body, or the resurrection body. And the idea is that this is what is within all of us. And as we peel away the material aspect of ourselves, we ultimately are left with the immaterial aspect of ourselves, our pure essence, our pure selves, which they refer to as the rainbow body of light. And in this image, we see that this is Padmasambhava, who we'll be talking about here in detail momentarily, who is modeling for us the spiritual accoutrements or spiritual apps of those who have attained the rainbow body, including the crown of glory, the resurrection stick, the Vajra, or the lightning bolt, which he holds at his heart, which symbolizes compassion in action, the golden rays, and the lotus throne. This is the same as the Christian robe of glory that Jesus wears in his resurrection. And once again, the Tibetans teach that one way to open passageways in our consciousness, pathways to our ascension, is through the sacred image itself. As an enlightened being, Padmasambhava has the ability to transmit the vibration of enlightenment to seekers via his physical image, which is equal to pure spirit imagery. What this means is that images of Padmasambhava in his rainbow body transmits the vibration of this perfect state. The Tibetans teach that just seeing images such as what we're looking at here of the rainbow body activates our own glory body. So let's take a moment to contemplate, meditate, and reflect on this image and recognize that we're opening pathways in our consciousness to our ascension just by interacting with these powerful, powerful images. Because the idea is that the image puts us in the energy field of the guru. And what I'm going to suggest to you as we go along, that as we look at the images of Padmasambhava and Yeshe Shojial, Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Francis and Claire, is that these images are actually putting us in the energy field of these avatars or gurus, and we are opening passageways in our own consciousness to them, to be able to not only follow in their pathway, in their passageway, but also to join them in the ultimate goal of all of these beings, which is to attain our own individual enlightenment, but also to literally to save our planet. Here we're looking at Yeshe Shojial, who is Padmasambhava's consort, who is showing us a divine feminine example of the rainbow body of light. We see her standing on her lotus, radiating the rays of light from her body, with the rainbow ribbons going into the pure land where the enlightened ones live, where the pure ones dwell. This is very similar. Now I'm going to ask you to consider what we see in Botticelli's painting, where Mary is wearing the multicolored cloak. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that when Mary is shown enthroned as she is in Botticelli's painting and she's receiving that golden crown, that is the same as the golden crown that Padmasambhava is wearing. The throne that Mary sits on is interchangeable with the lotus throne. And that she is in fact demonstrating us the birth of the divine child, not only in the form of her physical son, Jesus, but also in her metaphorical self, the birth of her divine child within. This is a contemporary image that shows a male figure with the rainbow body paint all over his body holding a child. And this is the idea that the rainbow body self is our true self, and we are giving birth to this divine child by our own actions today. Another example of Mary in the many-colored cloak or garment with the plasma crown that I believe is interchangeable with Padmasambhava. This is Mary on the left, but it could be Yeshe Shojial. It could be Nefertiti, as we're going to see, because all of these examples of the divine feminine that we're going to show also model the idea of the ascended body or the resurrection body or the rainbow light body. And to me, they're all part of a continuous transmission of a sacred teaching that was begun many thousands of years ago and culminates with each of us ultimately attaining our robe of light or our robe of glory and the attainment of our own plasma crown or crown of wisdom, crown of salvation. The Buddhists portrayed 3 dots within that crown. They call that the Chintamani. The Chintamani is actually the wish-fulfilling jewel. It's perhaps an actual physical stone or jewel, or perhaps it's an aspect of our consciousness, most likely the pineal gland. And the idea is that meditating on the crown with the Chintamani above it actually helps us to open pathways to our ascension. So I've been looking for various examples of Buddhist art where we see the triple dot symbol of the Chintamani and recognizing that, once again, these are open eye meditations that we can connect with that will open these pathways within our own selves. and help us to connect with our ascended selves, our light body self. This is why you see the triple dot pattern on the angels in Christian art, and why you see Mary wearing the triple dot symbol in Christian art. It's all over her cloak here, and she holds the triple rayed flower of life as well. We see a similar image that we saw a moment ago with Mary and the divine child on her lap. We look on her cloak, we see a star. We look on the sofa and the covering of the sofa, and we see the Chintamani symbol all over it, connecting us between the Christian and the Tibetan tradition, connecting the idea of this wish-fulfilling stone, and that ultimately helps us to manifest our light body. Jesus, of course, holds the Book of Life in this painting from St. Catherine's Monastery in the Sinai with the symbol of the Chintamani on it. He wears it on his cloak here. And the reason I'm going into these triple dot images is because it's going to open up a passageway to a deeper understanding of the art of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, which we're going to come to here in just a moment. Here in Nashville, you see Jesus with the triple dot symbol of the Chintamani all over his cloak, transmitting it to Mary Magdalene. And then, lo and behold, we start to see images of Mary Magdalene in her multicolored cloak. And I believe that this is an example of Mary modeling the glory body or the resurrection body, which is actually the product of the oil that she holds in her alabaster jar. It's speculative, but I think there's enough of a connection in the Gnostic Gospels and elsewhere to suggest that Mary Magdalene knew the secret of attaining the light body. And that when this artist here in the National Gallery in London is showing Mary with the yellow sleeves, it means she's clothed with the sun, just like we see here with Padmasambhava. And the multicolored cloak, in my opinion, can always be interpreted as the coat of many colors, which is another term for the rainbow body of light. So I'm comfortable in suggesting to you that this could be an example of Mary Magdalene crossing over in artistically into the rainbow body or great perfection artwork. This is the white Tara, who is shown here in a lotus, the open lotus. She has her rainbow breeches on, as I call them. Look at her knee. It's got the rainbow color motif, and it's showing us that she is in fact in her rainbow body with her divine child, her ascended self up above. I want to point out one thing before we go on, and that is that the red ribbon that we see her wearing actually symbolizes the rainbow link or the rainbow bridge upon which these beings are able to ascend into the heavens and come and go, in fact, from the heavenly world to the earth plane. And here we see highlighted her rainbow knee, indicating that she's also in her rainbow body. So what I've gone around the bend here, maybe a little long ways, is to show the power of sacred art and to say that when we look at an image like this of Mary being crowned, or this coronation, there's many levels of interpretation. And the path I chose to take you down today was to suggest that the crown symbolizes her accessing her higher consciousness, connecting with this unknown divine realm. And the multicolored cloak or garment that she's wearing, I believe, is symbolic of the light body that she attains once she is connected with this divine light. Now, I want to move forward and or take our presentation into a different direction. I want to head for ancient Egypt and Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And the way we're going to do that is by following the path of this transparent sash that we see emerging from the golden shield. If you look onto the left-hand side, you see that transparent sash is snaking its way over, if you will, to the angel on the left. And the angel on the left is portrayed inhaling something from this transparent sash. It looks like it's tipped in gold, and that this figure is in fact inhaling something from that transparent sash. Well, when I was standing there in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, it hit me that I've seen this exact kind of transference of divine light coming from an unknowable realm and being inhaled by a figure before. I've seen this exact motif, and the place that I saw it was here. Going back to 1300 BC, ancient Egypt, with Akhenaten, the great heretic king, who launched a religious revolution based on the idea that we can connect with an invisible sun he called the Atan. And what we see in this ancient Egyptian art is that Akhenaten and Nefertiti, his wife, are portrayed in these anointing scenes where they are underneath the rays coming from the Atan disk. Traditionally, the Atan is interpreted as the sun, and he's accused of being either a sun worshiper by some, or others see that disk as a flying saucer, and that he, in fact, is some kind of an extraterrestrial being. I'm not going to go there because we know that there's a far deeper and more spiritual interpretation and understanding of what is actually being portrayed in this scene. What Akhenaten said was that this Atan disk symbolizes the light that illuminates the sun. It refers to a spiritual sun and other dimensional light. And in fact, what we see here is Akhenaten and Nefertiti connecting with that otherworldly light through our sun. And as we look at these images in more detail, we begin to realize that what they're practicing here is a very powerful form of sacred imagination. Because what Akhenaten said was this, or let me put it this way, when Akhenaten and Nefertiti took power, the very first thing that they did was have all of the roofs of the temples in Egypt destroyed. They ripped the roofs off the temples to allow the light to shine in. The next thing they did was they dispatched, or in a way fired, the entire bureaucracy of ancient Egyptian gods, all 365 of them. They got rid of them and said, you don't need to worship those gods anymore. You just need to connect with the Atan through Nefertiti and I. They practiced something called theurgy, which is a Greek word which refers to a drawing in or drawing down of a divine force. A drawing in or a drawing down of a divine force. The result is the illumination and perfection of the participants. So this is what we're actually seeing in both of these images of Akhenaten inhaling or drawing in the divine force symbolized by the Ankh or key of life, and also this angel inhaling this golden substance at the tip of these transparent sashes coming from this unknowable light source in Botticelli's painting. Further, these images makes me wonder if our body is like a radio that is switched on but isn't receiving. The soul needs to tune that radio so that the signal, which has been there all along, can be received and utilized. This is the message that I take from Akhenaten, that this light that illuminates the sun is all around us at all times. We focus on our sun as the light source, but in fact, it is a far more profound source that Akhenaten is asking us to tap into, and I believe so is Botticelli. So in my opinion, these two images are telling exactly the same story. They are coronation images where both of the figures are shown connecting with an otherworldly or supernatural divine force and experiencing an apocalypse. They are peeking into that other world, seeing the goings on, and receiving divine revelations. Now, Nefertiti, of course, has been in the news quite a bit lately. And the reason why is because it's thought possible by Nicholas Reeves that we have discovered the tomb of Nefertiti in Tutankhamun's tomb. However, just a couple of weeks ago, in May 15th of 2016, Egyptian Antiquities Minister Khaled El Nani has said more tests are needed to determine whether there is in fact a secret chamber within King Tutankhamun's tomb that contains her remains, and possibly even something more mysterious. So what lies beyond the door of Tutankhamun's tomb? Well, unfortunately, on May 11th, 2016, radar scans conducted by National Geographic found that there are no hidden chambers in Tutankhamun's tomb, disproving the claim that her secret grave is there. And it's kind of left us now wondering, well, did they really miss the mark that much? Or maybe there's something more going on here. Given that Zahi Hawass, the disgraced former Egyptian antiquities boss, is involved with National Geographic and is part of this, it leads people to wonder that maybe there's some games being played here. So we're going to have to look beyond Tutankhamun's tomb for now, for ancient Egyptian ascension teachings connected with Akhenaten and Nefertiti. One place we can sure do that is Deir el-Bahari, which is in Upper Egypt on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. It was built during the famed 18th dynasty, a time when magic and mystery were in the air. It was Hatshepsut's reign that ultimately led to Akhenaten and Nefertiti's reign a century or so later. Hatshepsut is one of the great pharaohs of ancient Egyptian history. She's also one of the most mysterious figures in all history. She is literally a star child, the offspring of the god Amun and a human female mother. She's the star child who became a pharaoh and married a commoner who discovered the secrets of transfiguration. And at Deir el-Bahari, the entire temple is devoted to ascension, resurrection, transfiguration. Her stepson, Tutmosis III, the so-called Napoleon of Egypt, who the Rosicrucians claim is their founder, and Lawrence Gardner said knew the secret of white powder gold, is also well represented at Deir el-Bahari, and is shown, in fact, as one of the great mystery initiators of all time. And it's immediately after Hatshepsut's reign that now we get the reign of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Akhenaten began his reign, as I said, by ripping the roofs off the Egyptian temples to let the light in and forbidding worship of all the Egyptian gods. Then he did something absolutely extraordinary. He said that there's no stone temple that is required for you to worship the Atan. All you needed to do was to have in your home, on your altar, one of these little tablets right here that portrayed Akhenaten and Nefertiti drawing down the power of the Atan. And that you then would be able to receive that same power through this image. Now, that's mind-blowing to me, because this is theurgy. This is the divine practice of drawing in the divine power. And in this case, Akhenaten and Nefertiti are saying you can do it through the image. Now, when you go into the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and some of the other museums around the world, you will see examples of these tablets in cases. And they're usually about 12 to 18 inches tall by a foot wide, maybe. They're designed to be portable. They're actual altars. And in a way, they're portals to the Atan. And by mirroring what Akhenaten and Nefertiti are doing, we can also participate in this divine theurgy, or this divine practice of drawing in the hidden light of the Atan. So on these tablets, you will see Akhenaten with the key of life at his nostrils. He's inhaling or breathing in this divine light, and he's making an offering to the Atan in the form of these alabaster jars. Nefertiti also holds the very same alabaster jars to the Atan. It's believed that these alabaster jars are filled with oil that is being activated by the hidden light of the Atan. And this idea of a holy oil being used by these immortal couples is one of the repeating motifs. Of course, happened in the story of Jesus and Mary Magdalene 1,200 years later, where Mary Magdalene slips into the role of Nefertiti as the anointer of Jesus, anointing him with a substance called chrism that the Gospel of Philip said produced the light body and is the reason why Christians are called Christians. It's not because of Christ, it's because of this chrism substance that was kept in Mary Magdalene's alabaster jar. I believe that Mary Magdalene derived her alabaster, certainly, from Amarna, which is where the mine was located, and that's the exact same location as Akhenaten and Nefertiti's new holy city that they constructed. But furthermore, I would suggest that she knew the secret of Nefertiti's alabaster jar as well. What did this oil and the light of the Atan do for Akhenaten and Nefertiti? Well, the answer is to take a look at the transparent garment that Akhenaten and Nefertiti are wearing. This transparent linen garment that she wears is symbolic of the attainment of our light body, of our resurrection body, of our next level of manifestation. And when they are portrayed, this time holding up a blue lotus to the Atan, or offering it to the Atan, they are wearing these transparent linen garments and indicating that they are becoming one or at one with the Atan or Atan, and thereby receiving this light that works towards the transmutation of their body into light. Now, this is kind of a different take on Akhenaten than you get in some of the popular circles, where they ask you to believe that Akhenaten was a long-skulled alien hybrid who worshipped a flying saucer. I personally don't subscribe to that belief. But I'm referencing here because a lot of people seem to believe that because Akhenaten is shown with this very tall headpiece on, that he's either an alien being or he's mimicking alien beings that he had encountered. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know what the odds of that being possible are, but I would suggest to you that the extraordinary skull cap that he wears is more than likely the same symbolically as the yellow skull cap that we find in Buddhist images of Gendun Drop, the first Dalai Lama. The yellow skull cap in Tibetan Buddhism indicates the activated or the awakened crown chakra. And I propose that that is exactly what we're seeing in these images of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. When they are wearing this extremely long headgear, it indicates that they have activated their crown chakra. Let me put it this way. For my own spiritual development, I would rather follow the path that they're activating their crown chakra than the path that Akhenaten is an extraterrestrial or alien being and that he has a super elongated skull. So, yeah, we all get to pick our passion, and mine is following more the spiritual and the path towards ascension. As we follow that path, we come to this incredible symbol of the Holy Family. It's from 1400 BC. It's Akhenaten, Nefertiti with their daughters underneath or being anointed by the rays of the Atan. We see the rays coming off the Atan disc or out of the Atan disc. They culminate in delicate hands that offer the key of life to Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Both of them are shown inhaling the key of life. Interesting, when you see the key of life in Egypt, most often you're to understand that that key is tipped with oil. And that is why they're inhaling that key. And what's happening here is that not only is Akhenaten inhaling that key, but he's also transmitting it through his breath to his daughter, whom we'll see in detail here in just a moment. But coming over to the middle, we see the serpent emerging from the Atan with the key of life hanging from the serpent, indicating that some kind of vibration is being transmitted here from the Atan disc. And both Akhenaten and Nefertiti, as well as their daughters, are receiving it. Here we see something really interesting, and that is that Nefertiti appears to be maybe receiving a double dose, if you will, of the key of life, because there are two that are joined right there at her nose, whereas there's only one on the other side with Akhenaten. The other thing is look at that outermost ray coming from the Atan. That ray does not culminate in a delicate hand with the key of life. Instead, it's going directly into her third eye, activating her crown. Now, one way of reading this, among many, is that this is showing that she is not only receiving a double dose of the key of life, but that she has a direct connect. And it's going straight into her consciousness and activating her crown in this extraordinary way. I'd love to show this photo. It was taken on one of my tours. This is in the Sekhmet Chapel at Karnak, where Akhenaten and Nefertiti would have spent quite a bit of time before building their new city in Amarna. And we see what appears to be some kind of a light being that is got a hand that is shaped exactly like the hands in the image from Akhenaten. Take a look at those hands at the end of these images here. And now let's go back to our photo from Luxor, or from Karnak rather, and notice that the shape of the hands that offer the key of life is strikingly similar to this, what some people interpret as a light being, or a humanoid type light being here in the Sekhmet Chapel. It's just extraordinary to contemplate that perhaps we did connect with this level of consciousness, or this level of being during that experience. Now, taking this to another level here, let's look at this isolation image here of Nefertiti on her throne with her daughter. She's got the beam going directly into her third eye. She's getting a double dose of the key of life. And what I want to call your attention to is the red sash that Nefertiti is wearing. There's no color on it in the image from Amarna, but we know that what she is wearing is the same as the red sash of Isis. This symbolizes something absolutely extraordinary and points to the divine nature, really, of Nefertiti. That red sash is the same as the red sash that we see the white Terra wearing. It symbolizes a cosmic umbilical cord. It symbolizes that this person has attained an advanced level of consciousness, and that she, in fact, is perhaps, as I'm suggesting here, an illuminated light being, or on the path to attaining the light body. And I believe that the source of Nefertiti's light body activation, as well as Akhenaten's, was in fact the Atan. And as I said, the Atan was the light that illuminated the sun, but it's a universal spiritual presence. It's the Lord. It's the divine manifesting power. In contact with the Lord always brings about mystic rapture, which is another name for attainment of the rainbow body of light. And as we're going to see here in a moment, these teachings were picked up and utilized by Jesus and Mary Magdalene 1,300 years or 1,200 years after the time of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. So what I'm suggesting here is that when we're seeing Akhenaten and Nefertiti in their transparent robes, and especially Nefertiti wearing the red sash, as that this is indicating that they are on the path of ascension, and that Nefertiti, like Isis, and later like Mary, by wearing that red sash, puts her in a continuous line of priestesses that includes the white Tara and others, that indicates that they have attained or are in the process of attaining the rainbow light body. And that what Nefertiti offers to us and Akhenaten offers to us is the idea of coronation, or the activation of our pathways of our consciousness through connecting with the Atan. And one way that we do that is by contemplation, meditation, and reflection on the images of the Atan. But now let's take that one step forward. That what they're actually telling us to connect with is the key of life. And this brings up a bit of wordplay, because the word Atan could be produced, or pronounced rather, a tone, suggesting they're being anointed by a tone or a vibration. And the idea that our sun acts as a transmitter of a key of life that comes from some other dimension is actually based on solid science. What most people don't know is that our sun has many layers, 7 layers, in fact. Not only that, but our sun rings like a bell. And that at Stanford's observatory, they have shown that our sun rains a key of life upon the earth, and that our sun is like a giant musical instrument. The entire sun, Stanford says, vibrates from a complex pattern of acoustical waves. It rings like a bell and vibrates like an organ pipe. The National Optical Astronomy Observatory says we can learn a lot by listening to the sun. And in fact, our sun has 10 million keys or notes. And that term notes is very interesting to us because, as we said, the key of life in ancient Egypt was tipped with oil. And we describe oils by describing the different notes of the fragrance of the oil. Very interesting correspondence here. So maybe it is possible, or in fact probable, that Akhenaten had tapped into the song of the sun. Maybe one of the keys that are coming from our humming sun is the one that activates our light body. And as we become one with that sun, or that hum from the sun, it begins to feed our light body and assists us in our transformation. That's the concept here. And it's extraordinary to think that this is what they were practicing in ancient Egypt and what they meant by becoming one with the sun. We tend to fear our sun today, as they did in ancient Egypt as well. But they knew that our sun was a great emitter of life-supporting substances, even substances that can assist us in making, weaving, or crafting our light body. It comes from the heart of our galaxy, passes through an interdimensional gateway of our sun, and is reflected by the moon. This divine light, once we detect it, magnify it, this subtle spiritual energy can shift our perceptual senses. This can come from spiritual initiations such as baptisms and special rites, or divine works, theurgy, where this higher vibrational or dimensional energy illuminates those who are open to receive it. And this is the light that brings about mystic rapture, which is symbolized by the transparent garments of light that Akhenaten and Nefertiti are wearing. But again, to repeat, one of the key revolutions that Akhenaten and Nefertiti installed or enacted as a result of their teaching was that you don't need a stone temple to bring this light in. You can utilize one of these sacred tablets and connect with it, just as they are doing here. Extrapolating on what we discussed earlier about the power of sacred art, I can suggest to you that this image on your screen of one of these actual tablets from Amarna, portal or gateway that can assist us in opening these passageways in our consciousness to access this divine light. Extraordinary, extraordinary, extraordinary. So I encourage you to follow their pathway. Follow Akhenaten and Nefertiti on their pathway. And once again, use the power of your imagination, your consciousness, to imagine what would it be like to inhale that cosmic vibration, to breathe it in. What would that feel like to you? And what would that do to your body, your mind, and your consciousness? Imagine that you're holding that alabaster jar filled with this chrism, this sacred oil, that you're in fact charging this oil as you open it to the Atan. This is more than just kind of playing with our mind. It is opening us up to the true quantum potential of our mind. And this is how we make the metaphysical, the unreal, real within our body. So thank you, Akhenaten and Nefertiti, for this absolutely mind-blowing idea that we can use this sacred art and that we can draw in the rays of the sun, inhaling the flowering flames, and follow their path of purification. We're going to take a break here in just a few minutes, but before we do that, I just wanted to bring in this piece of another of our sacred couples, immortal couples, Francis and Clare of Assisi. This image I'm going to show you was commissioned by the Holy Trinity Franciscan Friary in Harlan, Kentucky. An original prototype, says the artist, it was designed to illustrate an event from the saints' lives. Francis and Clare would retire to the woods near Assisi, it says, to converse with one another. The villagers of Assisi, seeing a red glow over the forest, ran with buckets of water to douse what they assumed was a fire. Instead, they found Francis and Clare seated in a clearing, wrapped in conversation, surrounded by a holy fire. The icon shows the fulfillment of Christ's promise in the gospel, when two or more are gathered in my name, I am there with them. And the figure of the risen Christ is in their midst and connecting with them from the red mandorla of Seraphs. Suggests to me that what we have here is another kind of reflection, if you will, on Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Francis and Clare, who have connected with this divine light, this divine fire, and have opened up a portal in their unified consciousness. And it was so powerful and so strong that people thought that the hillside around Assisi was on fire. I mean, that's absolutely mind-blowing to me. So we're going to continue on with Akhenaten and Nefertiti just before the break here. We'll see how this comes up. And then after the break is when we'll get back into the story of Francis and Clare. But I just wanted to bring them in for a moment. So let's just go back here, pick up a couple of things, and then we'll take a break here momentarily. This is Akhenaten with his daughter Mary Totten. And as I said a moment ago, Akhenaten is inhaling the key of light and transmitting it through his breath to Mary Totten. She points to this very interesting three-pronged glyph. That glyph is called mist. And what's happening here is that Akhenaten is transmitting this powerful vibration through his breath. Now, there's some controversial research that says Akhenaten and Moses are the same figure. What's very interesting is that as the writer of the Old Testament, Moses would have told the story of the transmission of the divine light from Adam, or from God to Adam. This is exactly what Akhenaten did. And in the book of Genesis, it says, the Lord God formed man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. So here we see God portrayed as a red-winged seraph, just like we saw with Francis and Clare a moment ago. And he's breathing that life-giving light into their consciousness. Well, this is exactly what Akhenaten is doing with his daughter, breathing in the life-giving light of the Atan. The glyph that she is pointing to is the Egyptian hieroglyph of mist, which means to bear, to give birth, and to create. It also means do and instruction. So very interesting. What we actually are seeing here is Akhenaten not only transmitting the breath of the light of Atan to his daughter, but also giving her instruction, initiation. He's awakening her consciousness. And the very same glyph that she points to is the Egyptian hieroglyph Akut, which means beings of light or wise instructed folk, the great light, i.e., the sun. Isn't that interesting? That what Akhenaten is doing is illuminating her in the mystery of the sun and also the Atan, but also apparently in a class of beings called the Aku. Additional definitions of Aku means to shine, to be bright, splendid, and glorious. This is telling us that Akhenaten knows the secrets of these beings of light these wise, instructed folk. And even as Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval explain in their book, Message of the Sphinx, the hieroglyphs of Aku can also mean transfigured beings, shining ones, and shining beings. This is the secret of the triple rays, is what we're seeing here. These three rays coming from the star, here in this image from Tutankhamun's tomb, the triple rays of love, light, and peace that Akhenaten is, or his daughter is pointing to, are the very same triple rays that we later see 1,100 years later or so in the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist. When John baptizes his cousin Jesus, he transmits the Holy Spirit to him. And then Jesus utilizes the light of the Holy Spirit, which is the same as the Atan, and transfigures into an illuminated light being. And so what we're witnessing here is actually the crossover from the ancient reign of Akhenaten and Nefertiti around 1300 BC, now coming into the Christian tradition with Jesus as the transfigured being who is portrayed after his baptism as standing in the triple rays of the light of the Lord, or the light of the Atan. To me, this is, again, showing the crossover of the Egyptian mysteries into the Christian mysteries. And anytime I see the three-pronged rays, or three rays coming off of a circular disc, as we see here, three squiggly lines, or even the triple dots in a circle, I'm always connecting it with Akhenaten, but I'm also connecting it with this triple ray symbol, which is called the Wheel of Joy, and happens to be the logo, if you will, for the Tibetan Great Perfection tradition. And it's exactly the same as the triple rays or triple dots of the Chintamani. And as I piece all these together, what I'm asking you to consider is that what happened at the time of Jesus and Mary Magdalene was they recovered this lost teaching of Akhenaten and the Atan, and now Jesus becomes the exemplar of this teaching, just like Akhenaten. And when we see the disciples gathered in the upper room at Pentecost with the flames coming out of the top of their head and the Holy Spirit bursting rays of light, that this is exactly the same experience that we see portrayed in the tablets from Amarna. That the light of the Atan, which means the Lord, is the same as the light of Pentecost that we see when the Essene initiates were gathered after Jesus' resurrection. Because in these scenes, we are seeing the resurrected Jesus transmit the light of the Holy Spirit to the disciples. And they've all got flames coming out of the top of their heads, indicating that they are, in fact, highly trained metaphysical initiates who are receiving this divine light. And in my opinion, once again, this is showing the crossover from Akhenaten and Nefertiti into the Christian mysteries, where now it's going to be Jesus and Mary Magdalene who are the exemplars of this teaching. So once again, following our path of sacred art and that tradition, let's just imagine as we cycle through some of these images here of the Pentecost, that we are participants. We are on the receiving end of this divine light. And once again, try to imagine what it would be like to be in the light of the Atan, or in the light of Pentecost. That's our quest, and that is our goal. So what I'm going to do for now, it's just about half past the hour. We're going to take a 15-minute break and come back at a quarter to the hour, or 45 minutes past, and then we'll pick up and we'll resume the next part of our presentation. So thank you, everybody, once again, for being here. I will see you back here in 15 minutes. Okay, everybody, welcome back. Where we left off, we were making this comparison here between the image from Amarna, of Akhenaten and Nefertiti being anointed by the rays of the Atan. And on the right, we are looking at Mary and a group of Essene initiates who are being anointed by the light of the Holy Spirit in what is called Pentecost. 50 days after Jesus' resurrection, he appeared to the disciples in the upper room and transmitted to them the light of the Holy Spirit. Now, it's interesting that in ancient Egypt, the Atan is spelled with a T, whereas in Christianity, the Lord is, the name is Adon, spelled with a D, but the letters are interchangeable. The letters T and the letters T are interchangeable. So it appears that, once again, we're looking at a crossover of these ancient traditions. Now, what's interesting about this is that here is Mary amongst the same circle of stars, the same circle of initiates. This is another representation of Pentecost, when this divine light is manifesting from the sacred realms. We've now got enough of a sense from the images from Amarna of what is actually transpiring here, that a portal has been opened from this higher dimensional realm, and that this light is being transmitted into the open consciousness of these disciples. They have flames coming off the top of their head, once again, indicating that they are initiates, and in fact, they're at the level of the angels, the seraphim angels that we discussed briefly earlier. This is the Essene quest to transform themselves into angels. The Dead Sea Scrolls are very explicit in the Essene belief that they were one, communicating with angels, they were living with angels, and that they were actually in the process of becoming angels. So when we see these Essene initiates led by Mary in the scene of Pentecost, we are dealing with humans who are not entirely human anymore. They are more divine than they are human. They are more angelic than they are human. And they have found the keys to awakening their consciousness so that they could connect with the light of the Lord, which the Egyptians again called the Atan. The book of Proverbs says that the soul of man is a candle of God. And this points to the quest that all of us have to light our own interior candles, as we see here in the head of Buddha, to awaken our consciousness and to become points of light or points of illumination. This is why the lighted taper or candle was the original symbol for the first Christians. And this is also why they referred to themselves as Illuminati. They were the awakened ones who had lit the candle within their consciousness, just like we see here with Kuan Yin, and awakened their consciousness. Now, I love this tanka of Kuan Yin, one, because she's got the flame coming out of her crown chakra, but she's also got that beautiful multicolored or many-colored cloak on as well. And the idea is that our awakened consciousness and our attainment of our radiant light body, of course, go hand in hand. And so, as we study this image of Kuan Yin, we are activating part of our consciousness as well, and saying, I am that. And as we said earlier, from a deep metaphysical level, we are connecting in the quantum realm with our future self that has already attained this ability and this state of being, and beginning to make it physical in this life, in this physical life. And so we see the immediate crossover between Kuan Yin and Mary. Mary with the flame coming out of her crown chakra, just exactly like Kuan Yin. What we're looking at in these images, of course, is the activated pineal gland, which is between the two, that's the third eye between the two eyes and the temple of the human body. In Tibetan sacred art, the Buddha is often shown with a gold conical jewel rising from the protuberance on his head. The protuberance indicates the fully developed 1,000-petal lotus, and the gold jewel is the Philosopher's Stone, the stone of transmutation. This is the stone that transmutes the body into light. And this stone, of course, is delivered by the dove in the Christian Holy Grail tradition. Jesus referred to the dove that delivers this stone in the Gospel of Thomas when he said the Pharisees and the scribes had taken the keys of knowledge, which is the same as the Egyptian keys of life, and have hidden them. They did not go in, and those who wished to go in the kingdom of heaven, they did not allow. But you, be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Because with that childlike sense of innocence and wonder, we can open and expand our consciousness and perceive the dove or the light of the Holy Spirit and be anointed by the Lord, the divine manifesting power. And this, to me, is the ultimate secret of not only the Amarna revolution of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, but it was also the purpose of the Essene revolution that ultimately manifested in the life mission of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So very important here. I always like to show this painting commissioned by Manly P. Hall of the opening of the third eye by M.K. Seraph. In Manly P. Hall's book, he says that the painting of the head of Minerva or Athena, the Virgin, shows in part the activities of the pineal gland and the pituitary body at the time of the opening of the third eye. The Kundalini fire is seen rising upward through the spinal canal into the shape of a dove. The pineal is shown radiating a blue aura. This is another wonderful open eye meditation on the awakening of our consciousness, and in this case with Athena as the model. I really love this painting because not only do we get the dove symbolizing the Kundalini rising upward, activating the stone of the pineal gland, which is radiating the blue aura, but also look at Athena's face. You've got this thin line of light that extends outward from her skin, indicating that once we activate the stone, or once the dove or the Lord, the light, the Atan, activates the stone within us, we then are able to transmute our body into light. And of course, the serpent that we see on the top of Athena's head here, or Minerva's head, is the same as the serpent that we saw protruding from the third eye in those tablets of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. So another crossover between these traditions. So here in the detail, we see the serpent on top of the plasma crown, indicating the awakened crown chakra, and we can more clearly see that thin layer of light extending from her skin. And then here's Nefertiti in the detail with the coiled serpent protruding from her third eye. And she is also wearing the plasma crown as well. So really important crossover to show how this symbolism originated with Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and then comes through the Christian tradition and now is portrayed here in this beautiful painting here by M.K. Seraph. So this is what the coronation scenes are always about, is activating that crown and putting on the awakening of our higher consciousness centers, ultimately towards being able to perceive these radiant light beings, the Aku, as they were called by the Egyptians, the angels of the Jewish and Christian tradition, who live in the higher dimensional realms. Now, according to legend, after Christ's death or resurrection, Mary of Magdala moved to southern France, where she lived as a hermit in a cave in Aix-en-Provence, at St. Baume. There, she was transported 7 times a day by angels into the presence of God, where she heard with her bodily ears the delightful harmonies of the celestial choirs. Could this be the sound of the sun? Could this be the hum of the sun? Could this be the sound of the Atan coming from the higher dimensional realm, stepped down through the sun, which she heard with her bodily ears, but she was also hearing probably celestial harmonies with her light body as well. Artists depict Mary Magdalene ascending into the divine presence through multicolored clouds accompanied by these angels. So let's take a look at a few of these images here, because we often speak of the ascension of Jesus, but we don't often speak enough of the ascension of Mary Magdalene. But this is how it's portrayed in Christian art, with Mary ascending on these multicolored or rainbow clouds, being assisted by angels. We see similar symbolism or motifs coming in here. Mary Magdalene in the cloud, held aloft by angels, with 2 other angels preparing to put this crown on top of her as well. So this is the same crown that Padmasambhava wears. It's the same crown that Jesus wears in his symbols of him in majesty. It's the symbol of our awakened consciousness, our awakened cosmic consciousness. Here from Assisi, at the Church of San Francisco in Assisi, we see Mary with the hair covering her body, which is a very interesting motif that we really only see in the Ascension images of Mary Magdalene. This one is in the Getty Museum from 1469 by Taddeo Crivelli. We see Mary on her multicolored Ascension cloud, which is the same cloud that Jesus ascends on as well, and is actually a symbol of the Merkaba, or what the Jewish mystics call the Merkaba, or throne chariot. And once again, she's got the long hair covering her entire body. And now look at the rays of the Atan, or the sun, at the very top of the image. I say the Atan because it looks very similar to what we see in those images from Amarna. Mary wears the celestial disk, again, indicative of her awakened consciousness. She's created a receptacle to receive the divine light from this other dimensional realm. This unusual nude figure represents Mary Magdalene as a mystic ascetic. Excuse me, just one moment. I'm trying to fix something here. Okay. Yeah, so this is Mary Magdalene as a mystic ascetic, and according to the legend, she lived, as I said, as a hermit in St. Baum, clothed only by her hair. And every day she was raised up in the sky by angels to hear the heavenly chorus. So here's again our tie-in with our Amarna, that they're hearing these heavenly sounds, this heavenly chorus, this celestial music, the music of the spheres. And that is a key dynamic or key element in both the Ascension stories of Mary Magdalene and also of the what I proclaim the Ascension stories of Magdalene and Nefertiti, where they're shown wearing the light body garments. So here you see these statues again. These are in the Louvre of Mary clothed only in her hair, but we know that this is actually a scene where she's going to be ascending on her cloud with the assistance of the angels. Again, this is a photo I took in the Louvre of Mary Magdalene with that long hair motif. Very interesting. We see the same thing here. This is a Botticelli painting. A lot of symbolism going on here, where Mary Magdalene is completely covered in her long hair. John the Baptist is on the other side. They are both on either side or flanking an open portal that is with the crucifix in the middle of the portal, with Jesus on the crucifix with the dove of the Holy Spirit above. So these two are clearly in energetic poses here, with Mary Magdalene offering some kind of perhaps Reiki energy, holding space, holding light. Same thing with John the Baptist. And it all goes to this idea that they are ultimately hearing these celestial harmonies and opening this portal into the divine realm. And this is the portal that Mary Magdalene will ride in her ascension as well. So we see her starting out on the cloud. She begins to ascend, and now here's the angel with this transparent sash that, and also holding the grail. So let's take a look at that one again. It's a little animation I made to kind of give us a better sense of her ascension. And here's the actual painting here. So Mary Magdalene went through the process of ascension as well. And so now what we have here is not just Jesus as the exemplar of the ascension, but also Mary. And as I said earlier, I personally have a sense that maybe she was more of the ringleader of the Essene movement than many heretofore give her credit for. There's the inspiration for this painting that we're looking at comes from Jacobus de Voragini's book, The Golden Legend, which was written in the 13th century and really opened us up to some esoteric interpretations of the story of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And Jacobus says that the saint, desiring, referring to Mary Magdalene, desiring to contemplate celestial things, withdrew into a mountain cave which had been prepared by the angel's hands, and there she remained for 30 years unknown to everyone. Each day, the angels lifted her into the skies, and for an hour, she heard the music after which, replete with this delicious meal, redescended into her cave and had not the slightest need of body ailments. Wow. So we're being asked to imagine that Mary Magdalene went into this cave, ascended into the heavens each day, and heard this celestial choir, and was also fed the food of the angels. That's really profound. This is Peter Paul Rubens' ecstasy of Mary Magdalene. Really extraordinary. The setting for the painting is the rocky ledge at the mouth of that legend we just described ago, the cave. Her eyes are slightly open, but appear somewhat lifeless. Her face and upper body have been lit up by a shaft of light, which we see coming down from the top right of the painting, and she appears to be in a trance-like state. The art historian Badin points out that the ecstasy which transfigures Mary Magdalene is surprisingly reminiscent of the detailed descriptions that the Spanish Saint Teresa of Avila also experienced. So what we're talking about here is legends, beginning with Jacobus de Voragine, that Mary Magdalene not only ascended, but her body was transfigured by ecstasy and by this shaft of light. Now, you see her body there, and you also see her alabaster jar. You see that there at the base of the foot of the angel there on the left. You just got to wonder what is in that alabaster jar and what was its effect on Mary Magdalene's consciousness as it takes her into this ecstasy that enables her to perceive that divine shaft of light, just like the Atan, and then also to be transfigured by that light. Is this the chrism oil that she anointed Jesus with? Is this the oil, the same oil that the Archangel Michael anointed Enoch with, that dissolved his body into light and transformed his body into a glorious light that was just like the angels in heaven? Is this what we're talking about? Or is there maybe some other substance in this jar altogether that takes Mary Magdalene into an ecstatic trance where now she can perceive this other dimensional light? And is that shaft of light that we're seeing here actually the same as the light of the Atan? And if so, once again, we have to ask the question, is Mary Magdalene's alabaster jar the same as Nefertiti's alabaster jar? And in fact, are there substances that will enable us to perceive the divine light of the Atan and that can transfigure our body into light? The ancient Greek ancestor of our word ecstasy is ekstasis, and it comes from the words meaning outside or beyond or stationless, or the place in which one stands or should stand, position, posture, or station. Thomas Conley understands the stasis portion somewhat differently, either as strife or as immobility, but then the Oxford English Dictionary records ekstasis or stasis transforming in meaning in late Greek, becoming withdrawal of the soul from the body, mystic or prophetic trance. Particularly among medical writers, ecstasy was used interchangeably with trance. And then ecstasy arrived in English via Old French sometime in the 14th century as a transliteration of the Greek. So interesting, in these paintings portraying the ecstasy of Mary Magdalene, we're either seeing her in a trance or only in a trance, or we're seeing her going into a trance and her soul withdrawing from her body. So this is how Mary Magdalene ascended. She uses this oil substance in her alabaster jar that awakens her consciousness, maybe puts her in a trance or a dream state, so that then she can perceive the shaft of light coming from the divine radiating or manifesting presence, the Atan or the Adon, the Lord. And then her soul withdraws from the body and ascends on those shafts of light. That's kind of the picture that we're putting together here. And I don't have all the answers yet about this, but I continue to do research on this line of thought that says this is what they were doing. This is what Jesus and Mary Magdalene were practicing, and they derived it from Akhenaten and Nefertiti, that we're preparing our consciousness in order to perceive this unknowable light, connect with these divine light beings who will assist us in our ascension. And this is, I take tremendous comfort in this line of thinking, because it says that ultimately we don't have to know how to do this on our own. We don't have to know everything. We just have to know enough. And we have to put ourselves at a level of vibration or on the radar of these celestial beings, call them the Aku, the shining ones, the beings of light, the wise instructed folk, the angels, and that they will assist us in our transfiguration and ultimately our ascension. And so I'm looking at Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and then Jesus and Mary Magdalene as way showers on this path. And the connecting link is the alabaster jar filled with that oil, which I propose is the chrism that dissolves our body into light, and especially the light of the unknowable, of the Atan, and also of the Holy Spirit. So let's look at this quote from Paramahansa Yogananda, because to me it kind of sums up what we've just been discussing. He said, "To love God with all your soul means to enter the state of superconscious ecstasy, which is direct perception of the soul in its oneness with God." Now, that to me is exactly what Akhenaten and Nefertiti were accomplishing, and also Jesus and Mary Magdalene. They were, through their practices, whether it just simply be using a tablet of Akhenaten and Nefertiti connecting with the Atan, or actual ecstatic substances, they entered a state of superconscious ecstasy, trance, draw from the body and experience oneness with God. That's ascension. That's ascension right there. It is the realization of the soul as a reflection of God, the soul's connection with the consciousness of God. So again, Paramahansa is saying to love God with all your soul, which he's tearing a page out of Jesus's book of Matthew, where he says the secret to eternal life is to love with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. That as we realize this and love with all our soul, we realize our soul is a reflection of God. I want you to remember this, because as we move forward and we begin to talk about Yeshe Sogyal and Paramahansa Yogananda, we're going to revisit this idea of our soul as the reflection of God. But as Paramahansa is saying here, to love God with all our soul is also to realize the soul's connection with the consciousness of God. And that must be exactly what Akhenaten and Nefertiti were doing in those tablets. They are connecting with the consciousness of the Atan, which to them is God, the great unknowable, the Lord, the light that illuminates the sun. And then Jesus and Mary Magdalene were doing exactly the same thing. Paramahansa continues saying, to love God with all the soul requires the complete stillness of transcendent interiorization. Trance, right? Going into trance, being able to access levels of mind beyond the frenzy of everyday life. So now, let's turn a page and let's talk about the second Buddha. Many people know about the first Buddha, but don't so many realize that there was a second Buddha, and this is Paramahansa. Excuse me, it's Padmasambhava, so sorry, who first incarnated actually in 250 BC as Gaurab Dorji. Guru Rinpoche is his name as Paramahansa Yogananda. 250 BC is really important in terms of our timeline. We're not going to dwell on it here, but this is when the Essenes are organizing in Jerusalem and beginning to assemble all of these various texts from the ancient world, from ancient Iran, Egypt, Iraq, India, elsewhere, all about how we attain our light body and how we cross over the boundary of flesh into spirit. So Paramahansa did it again. Padmasambhava, and then he reappears in the 8th century as Padmasambhava, and he brings the rainbow body of light teaching from India to Tibet. As I said, he's also known as Guru Rinpoche, or Precious Guru, and his followers regard him as the second Buddha. Padmasambhava was accompanied by Mandarava, an Indian princess, and also by his consort, Yeshe Shojial, as we'll see it here in just a moment. According to tradition, Padmasambhava incarnated as an 8-year-old child, appearing in a lotus blossom floating in a lake. This, to me, sounds like a manifestation of a spiritual being, as if out of thin air. He appeared, manifested, or incarnated as an 8-year-old child, manifesting out of a lotus blossom. His arrival in the world without father or mother, appearing in the center of a lotus blossom, identifies him as a spiritual being, a special being, possibly even as a celestial or a star being. In the Old Testament, we have a figure very much like this, Lord Melchizedek, who was born without mother or father, and it appears to have manifested in a way similar to Padmasambhava. The Bible says nothing about Melchizedek appearing in a lotus, but the lotus is always a symbol for a gateway or a portal between dimensions. So it's suggesting here that what's happened is that both Melchizedek and Padmasambhava are these celestial beings who can manifest from the immaterial world into the material world. So here we see Padmasambhava sitting in the rainbow ring, symbolic of the rainbow body, which is what he came to teach. This practice of dissolving the body into light, into pure essence, leaving behind only hair, toe, and fingernails, which have no nerves to be transmuted. And then once we attain this rainbow body of light, we are then able to travel into the celestial realms and take on physical incarnation, if we choose to, anytime we wish. And so here is a selection of images of Padmasambhava manifesting in a lotus in the rainbow body of light. This is a key image that we have seen several times in our presentation. And as we identified, Padmasambhava is sitting on the lotus throne, symbolic of the portal or gateway to other realms. He holds the dorji at the level of his heart chakra, which is the symbol, the Tibetan symbol for compassion and action. He wears the crown of salvation. He holds a holy stick that opens the gates of heaven and hell. And rainbow-colored and golden light radiates from his body. So he is showing us what is called the great perfection, or the attainment of the glory body, resurrection body, or the light body. This is the very same body that Jesus attained in his resurrection as well. Now, Padmasambhava was accompanied by, as I said, Mandarava, a princess, and also Yeshe Shojial, another Indian princess. And so when we look at their images, or images portraying them, we see the similar symbolism of the light body shown as pure white, radiating light in an orb of light, an egg of light, with rainbow rays manifesting from that orb. She also wears that red sash that we saw Isis wearing, and Mary wearing, and Nefertiti wearing. And as I showed earlier, I propose that when we see that red sash around their body, that is a shorthand symbol for their celestial status as enlightened beings who inhabit the light body. And I believe, and I could go into more detail and will at another time, to show how it became the symbol for the light body to the Egyptians, was picked up by the Christian tradition, and also here manifests a couple of thousand years later in the Tibetan tradition as this shorthand symbol for the rainbow body. Now, interesting thing here is that both Padmasambhava and Mandarava are still believed to be alive and active in this rainbow body form by their followers. She and Padmasambhava's other main consort, Yeshe Shodhyal, are believed to have hidden the secret teachings of the rainbow body in termas, or stones, hidden in a sacred valley in Tibet. Although others believe that these terma are hidden in sacred valleys around the world. They are there to be called upon today to all seekers who wish to attain the rainbow body of light. And I think it's one of the most extraordinary stories I've ever heard in any myth or sacred tradition, this idea that these stone treasures can be discovered and we can ultimately utilize them to activate our own rainbow body of light. What if the valleys are out here in the material world, in say maybe Tibet or southern France, for example, but what if the valleys are also within our consciousness? And that the pathway we want to beat is not to Tibet or southern France, as enjoyable and desirable as those kinds of treks would be, but rather the pathways we want to open up and the valleys we want to discover are actually within our own consciousness. That, to me, seems what they're ultimately pointing to, is that we all have these aspects within our consciousness of the divine male and female. And by tapping into them and uniting them within our own consciousness, we're able to give birth to the divine child within all of us. And so what I'm suggesting here is that, yes, Padmasambhava, Yeshe Shodhyal, and Mandarava were actual incarnate beings. They're also archetypal energies that all of us can tap into within our own selves. We all have a divine inner Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Yeshe Shodhyal, Padmasambhava within us, awaiting manifestation. And as we begin to link or identify with them out here and connect, especially with artwork portraying them, we begin to manifest them in here. Again, the metaphysical becomes the physical within our own bodies. And as we do this, something really extraordinary begins to happen. Our relationships on earth begin to transform as we take on these archetypal energies, and as men begin to link with the divine feminine within themselves and women link with the divine masculine within themselves, we begin to mirror that in all of our relationships. And by harmonizing the inner male and female, we then begin to unify our consciousness and link with our true selves. Now, I want to bring in this little bit of lore or history about Padmasambhava and Mandarava. The story is told that he was adopted by a local king and was chosen to take over the kingdom. And he secretly taught tantric teachings to Princess Mandarava, the king's daughter. Another access point, another pathway to follow up the tantric teachings of Padmasambhava and Mandarava. But upon discovering this, the king tried to burn Padmasambhava, but it is said that when the smoke cleared, he just sat there still active and in meditation. That's really kind of a really profound first date, right? You go to meet her father and he tries to burn you alive and you're still sitting there in meditation. It's a really profound message. After seeing this miracle or demonstration of super yogic powers, the king offered Padmasambhava both his kingdom and his daughter Mandarava. The two left the court, went to the sacred Maratika cave in Nepal to practice their secret tantric rituals. We're not going to get into the secret tantric rituals today, but what I wanted to talk about here instead was what happened next after they engaged in these tantric rituals. That was they had a vision of the Buddha Amitayus, the celestial Buddha, or Buddha of infinite light, manifested before them, emerged from the pure land, or the land of bliss, where he lives and works for the enlightenment and love of all beings. And he transmitted to them the teachings of the rainbow body of light. So here's a selection of images from the Rubin Museum of Art of the Amitayus, the Buddha of infinite light. And as we look at these, we want to think about this figure manifesting in our own consciousness and transmitting to us, our inner male and female, our harmonized inner male and female, the secrets of the rainbow body of light. Here he is shown in the Pure Land, radiating the rainbow ring, which is, of course, symbolic of the rainbow body of light that Padmasambhava then went on to teach in Tibet. Another really beautiful example here where he's got the cloak covered with stars, holding the pot filled with the elixir of light. We see the protrudence coming from the top of the head, indicating his candle is lit, his pineal gland is fully activated. And we are to mirror this, use this as an open eye meditation to activate our own pineal gland. This is an example also of the Amateus Buddha riding on the rainbow ring into the celestial realms. These enlightened beings can come and go from the earth plane, taking humans with them. That's really extraordinary to me, that one of these celestial beings can manifest as if out of thin air and take a human being with them. Just imagine that. So a couple more examples, and then we'll get back to our story here. Amateus, the Buddha of eternal life, is shown here in this incredible tanka of the 5 cosmic Buddhas of esoteric Buddhism. He's shown in his paradise, the Western Pure Land, enthroned beneath a flowering tree festooned with strands of jewels and auspicious symbols. I love this image. I'm going to show you why, because it's got an extraordinary teaching about the rainbow body encoded within it. Something you've probably never seen before. It's just absolutely mind-blowing to me. So again, the Buddha of eternal life, seated underneath this tree, the cosmic axis, festooned with jewels. He's very much, to me, like like Moses in the burning bush, which was burning, yet it was not consumed. Remember, this is what Padmasambhava did. He sat, his Madhurava's father tried to light him on fire, but Padmasambhava was not consumed by the fire. Same thing happened with Moses when he entered the burning bush. It was burning, but it was not consumed. And when Moses exited from the burning bush, he was radiating light. Now, I won't go into details about my theory about what exactly happened to Moses in the burning bush, but you can follow along with me as I suggest here that actually Moses attained his light body in the burning bush. He attained the level of the consciousness of Padmasambhava, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, Jesus, Mary, Magdalene. Save that for another discussion. But here we're looking at the Buddha of infinite light in his rainbow body underneath that wonderful tree of jewels. Now, the tree of jewels, it really captures my attention because we also know in alchemical terms, there's a tree of sapphires, which is a tree of jewels that represents ultimate enlightenment. One more comment about Moses. When Moses first went up Mount Sinai, he came back down with sapphire jewels in his hand that contained the secrets of enlightenment, suggesting maybe Moses really did enter a burning bush and scale the cosmic axis, the cosmic mountain, and retrieved one of these sacred jewels, symbolized by the sapphire blue stones that he smashed. And then he went back up Mount Sinai and returned with the 10 Commandments, the penal code that we now base most of our earthly laws upon. But think about this. This is a meditation on the diamond or the jewel within each of us. It's from Brian Weiss. And he tells how during a meditation or during a dream, he saw a diamond in everybody's chest, a beautiful diamond with 1,000 facets. Everybody's diamond is the same, he said, but some of the diamonds are covered with dirt and tar. And the job of the soul seems to be to clean the facets, he said. When all the facets are clean, the pressure seems to dissolve and the diamond just radiates light and disperses into the universe. Some people, he says, have polished a lot of the facets, maybe 900 or 999, and others only a few. They have a lot of work to do, said Weiss. And then he understood that everybody's diamond is the same. 1,000 facets and the potential is exactly the same, and everybody is on the same journey. I love that story by Brian Weiss because it corresponds with this tree of jewels that the Buddha polish the diamond within each of us. We begin to shine more brightly, but we also are connecting with this greater tree of jewels that we're all ultimately a part of. Paramahansa Yogananda said that the sun shines equally on diamond and charcoal, but the former has developed qualities that enable it to reflect the sunlight brilliantly, while the latter is unable to reflect the sunlight. Emulate the diamond in your dealings with people, brightly reflect the light of God's love. Now, again, let's think about this in the context of what we've been describing here. We're talking about the light of the Lord, the Atan, the divine manifesting power coming from some other dimensional realm, maybe stepping down through the sun. And we need some way to be able to reflect that light. And here we're describing a diamond that needs to be polished, a diamond with many facets, but obviously what we're describing here is actually the soul, right? So what we're actually doing is not polishing a diamond within ourselves, it's polishing the soul. And it is the soul itself that is able to reflect, as Paramahansa said a moment ago, the divine light of God's love. That's what all this is about. And this is what the relationship between Akhenaten and Nefertiti was showing, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, Padmasambhava and Yeshishodiol or Mandarava. It's all being reflected through the story of these immortal couples. They're all ultimately talking about the soul, how we polish the soul, how we can receive this divine light, and how we can transmute ourselves into an even brighter light. Now, where this takes me is to the story of Indra's net. And I want to share this with you here. It's so interesting and really kind of takes us into the cosmic realm of where Akhenaten and Nefertiti, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Yeshishodiol, and Padmasambhava must have placed their consciousness. Indra's net is a beautiful 3rd century Mahayana Buddhist legend about the god Indra, who commissions an artisan to craft a vast net across the universe. And I think this is the net of jewels above the Buddha of infinite light, okay? And when the net is complete, at each junction, Indra places a shining jewel, the facets of which reflect every other jewel in this cosmic network. Now, again, I'm asking you to take out the word shining jewel and put in the word shining soul, and we have the inner meaning of the story of Indra's net. So each jewel or soul represents all are intimately connected with one another. Any change in one jewel produces a change, however small, in all the others. Everything is interconnected in Indra's entangled web. And isn't this a beautiful definition of the sacred marriage between these divine or immortal couples? Any change in one produces a change in the other automatically. And this is kind of the justification for becoming one as well, is recognizing that anything, what I put in my mouth, also goes into the mouth of my wife, Claire, because we are one in this regard. If I drink too much, she gets a hangover, and she doesn't even drink wine, right? And I try not to do that very often, but it's a really good example of what I'm talking about here, that if what is going on in one is also reflected in the other. If she's not feeling well, I'm not feeling well. But by the same token, if she's polished 900 of her facets of her diamond, and I'm trying to catch up and I'm only at 750, then it's telling me that, wait a minute, maybe more of the facets of my diamond have also been polished. So you see how this idea of the intimate connection of the cosmos flows through into the intimate connection, both within the inner male and female within ourselves, and also in all of our sacred relationships as well. The artist is a receptacle for the emotions. Oh, shoot, I got this covered up here. I got to figure out how to remove this over here so I can read this. Excuse me, just a second. Darn. As I said a moment ago, Indra's net hangs over the palace of the Buddha of Infinite Light on Mount Meru, which is the axis mundi of Vedic cosmology and Vedic mythology. Indra's net has a multifaceted jewel at each vertex, and each jewel, as I said, is reflected in all the other jewels. So think of these jewels as sort of like these dewdrops here on these branches. Each one reflects the other, and each are intimately connected, just like the net of jewels above the Buddha of Infinite Light, sitting beneath the tree of jewels, the cosmic axis. For the Chinese Huang school of Buddhism, Indra's net symbolizes a universe where infinitely repeated mutual relations exist among all members of the universe. Let me repeat that. Indra's net symbolizes a universe where infinitely repeated mutual relations exist among all members of the universe. Imagine, says Alan Watts, a multidimensional spider's web in the early morning covered with dewdrops, and every dewdrop contains the reflection of all the other dewdrops. And in each reflected dewdrop, the reflections of all the other dewdrops in that reflection. And so ad infinitum. That is the Buddha's conception of the universe in an image. So our soul is one of these dewdrops. Now, this is leading to somewhere very important in terms of our understanding of ascension and the rainbow body. And I arrived at this next thought that we're moving into from my study of Padmasambhava. So here's the connection I want to make for you. Our soul is a dewdrop of the greater universe in the same way that our planet is a dewdrop, or an iteration, if you will, a fractal of our Milky Way galaxy. And our Milky Way galaxy is itself just a dewdrop, a tiny drop in the bucket of the entire cosmos that's composed of hundreds of billions of dewdrops. And it may be that our universe is a dewdrop in an infinite array of greater dewdrops in a greater dewdrop universe. It just goes on and on and on ad infinitum. This is the metaphysical message of the Mandelbrot set, and it corresponds directly to Indra's net. The Mandelbrot set, many of you I know are familiar with this, and probably have been for over 20 years or so. Going back into the 90s, people started talking about fractals for the first time in the Mandelbrot set. The Mandelbrot set is a fractal, and it's a natural phenomena or a mathematical set that exhibits a repeating pattern that displays at every scale. This is a depiction here of God as a craftsman appearing to craft what appears to be, to some, the Mandelbrot set symbol, which is what's encoded encased within this blue sphere. So here's God crafting this blue sphere, and here's the Mandelbrot set. What's interesting about this is that there's no way that this artist who created this image in the Middle Ages could have known about the Mandelbrot set, because it wasn't envisioned by the mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot until the middle of the 20th century. And then it wasn't even rendered into an image until computers came along that were powerful enough to do all the calculations, which is what we're looking at here. So this must be some kind of a universal image that we're being shown here. Now, follow along here. The 1970s and 1980s, mathematicians were working in an area and I'm sorry, I can't read my note here. I've got something covering up that I can't get rid of. I wish Neil could help me get rid of this thing up, this box in my right-hand corner. But anyway, we'll go on. They were trying to visualize this mathematical set of numbers, this equation called the Julia set or the Mandelbrot set. And then finally, they invent these computers in the 1980s, and they are able to draw computer images of the objects they were working on from these equations. And what they saw blew their minds. Fractal-like structures whose beauty and complexity is rivaled only by nature. And at the heart of them lay this Mandelbrot set. It's generated by what's called an iteration, which means to repeat a process over and over again. It's a set of numbers, and from those numbers you can generate pictures, and the pictures are infinitely complicated. And here's what they actually look like. As you go down into these iterations, follow along here. We're going to see, here's the Mandelbrot set. The white box shows that we're going to zoom into this portion of it, and the next slide shows the zoom. We're into this kind of curlicue sort of a thing here. Then when we go into the next level of iteration, we see that we're going to zoom into this part of the Mandelbrot set, and it brings us to this level of realization. Then when we decide to zoom in to this iteration, now we're going to look up into the top part with this seahorse, as they call it, and we see this level of detail. Now, here's where I'm going with this. As we follow these various iterations going into deeper and deeper levels, we're ultimately led into 6, 8, 10, 12 levels deep, where we come down into another, of course, Mandelbrot set. And so this is the infinitely repeating pattern of the Mandelbrot set. But the thing about this is that when the mathematicians started playing with this, they got really excited. And so they start tweaking the mathematical formula. And when they did that, they decided, or the tweaking of the formula, the equation, led them to, and here we go into the 12th or 13th level of detail. And as you can see, it's just extraordinarily beautiful. They're mesmerizing to look at. You can see why these fractals became so popular in the late 80s and 90s, and I think even today they're still popular among people who explore sacred geometry. But what I was getting to is that when they went forward with this, they noticed that the Mandelbrot set looks surprisingly like the shapes of a meditating Buddha. And so here's the Mandelbrot set superimposed over the meditating Buddha of infinite light, holding the Chintamani. Now that's really interesting because it shows that this repeating pattern, this cosmic pattern that goes as far out into infinity as you want, and even into, and then down into the inner realms, may in fact be the image in which man was originally created. Remember, the book of Genesis says God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Well, here's the Mandelbrot set. In the image of a meditating Buddha, they call these Buddha bots. Well, wait a minute. When we're told that we're made in the image of God, we want to think that that image has something to do with the human body. But it's not, the image that's being referred to is not actually the image of our physical body. We're made in the image of the light body of God. And the reason I say that is because in esoteric Buddhism, in esoteric Christianity and Judaism, it is believed that Adam and Eve originally had luminous, rainbow-like bodies of light. And then after our eviction from the Garden of Eden, we were given coats of skin. So what did the original body, glorious rainbow-like body of light of Adam and Eve look like? My answer is the Mandelbrot set. that this is the image of God in which we are made. So here's the rainbow body of light of Padmasambhava. There is the Mandelbrot set. So you can see where I'm getting this concept here that our original light body image of which we are made is the same as the Mandelbrot set. And that we are an infinitely small reflection of God. And that we are made in his image. And originally God is this luminous humanoid rainbow-like being as described by Ezekiel and Isaiah. But it corresponds precisely with the Mandelbrot set. As I said, mathematicians began rendering or tweaking the Mandelbrot equation, and they came up with what they called the Buddha-brot. And this occurred in 1993 by Melinda Green, was the name of the mathematician who first started doing this. So here's a selection of the Buddha-brots. And if this isn't an image of the human light body, then I don't know how else to portray it for you, because in my opinion, these Buddha-brots, this one by Eric Reinhold, are interchangeable images with the rainbow light body. So I'm going to go back just for a moment. We'll start with Padmasambhava and note his luminous humanoid rainbow-like figure. He's not in a flesh and blood body here. He's in his glory body or resurrection body, which I believe is the same as the light body of Jesus and also Adam and Eve. And the shape of his body is very similar, if not the same as the shape of the Mandelbrot set. So you can see where I'm getting this inspiration from. And then when we tweak this and go into the Buddha-brot, which is based on the Mandelbrot equations, I think we're seeing the human light body here coming out of these mathematical equations. And it's showing us that we are reflections of God. We are fractals of God. And through the lens of the rainbow body, through this teaching of Padmasambhava, combined with, as I'm doing uniquely here, I mean, there's no rainbow body teachers that connect the rainbow body to the Mandelbrot set and Indra's net, as we're doing here. This is fresh territory, so it's raw. But I'm asking you to follow along here, because I think it shows us something very unique about our soul, and also dovetails perfectly with the rainbow body teaching. We can see through the Mandelbrot set and the combination of that with Indra's net that our souls reflect one another. In my soul, like your soul, contains the reflections of all other souls. In fact, the entire universe, according to this theory, can be found in my soul and in each reflection in each soul, and so on ad infinitum. Our soul is that dewdrop that Alan Watts described just a moment ago, reflecting ad infinitum. So, wow, that is a really extraordinary realization to me. It's something that I've been working on recently. It's fairly new. Important enough to include in our presentation today. And so now what I want to do, it's a quarter to the hour. We're going to take another 15-minute break, and I'm going to come back and we're going to take a look at the incredible story of Francis of Assisi and Claire of Assisi. And this will be our wrap-up. I hope you've enjoyed what we've been presenting so far. I'll look forward to seeing you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, welcome back. It's the top of the hour. I hope you enjoyed your break, and thank you once again for joining us today. We've been on a pretty long journey here, beginning with a discussion about the nature of sacred art, which is, if I didn't say it then, I'll say it now, is the core of my work as a mythologist and an investigator, is looking into these extraordinary paintings that were created with the intention by these artists, many of them inspired by divine inspiration, others of them told what to paint, but always, in the examples that I'm showing, created with an intention that these images are actually going to be portals, pathways for us to connect with the divine realm. It's an amazing concept, and I only hinted at really the tip of the iceberg of the research I've been doing on this, and I'll have more to say perhaps later. But if you read my works in my book, The Watchers, or The Secret of Sion, or my Rainbow Body webinar, which we did with PortalToAscension, and other works, this is the core concept that I've derived from many of these spiritual master painters and others, is that these images really can show us the way, and that they're created with the intention that they will activate the consciousness within us, that will place us into those scenarios where the divine beings are dwelling. Amazing concept. And I'm going to continue to develop that in future work. And one of the figures that really inspired me in this regard was St. Francis of Assisi. So we have looked at Akhenaten and Nefertiti, we've looked at Jesus and Mary Magdalene, we've looked at Padmasambhava and Mandarava and Yashodhyaal. Now let's journey to Assisi, Italy, and follow the story of St. Francis of Assisi and Clare of Assisi. So here's Assisi sitting up on the hillside in Umbria in northern Italy. It's one of the most palpably powerful spiritual places that I've ever been. And I have a real soul yearning to go back there again and again because of just the pureness of this place. And I don't know if that pureness is there because of the perception of Francis of Assisi, or maybe Francis was there because the place already exuded this sense of pure spiritual vibration. It's absolutely wonderful. And what we're looking at here is photos of the Basilica of San Francisco, the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, which was begun in the 13th century, immediately after his canonization in 1228. And as you walk amongst this place, you can, as I say, you can really feel this deep spiritual vibration, this sense of purity. I mean, the people there are so fortunate to be there. And everyone that I've ever encountered in Assisi is just in a good mood. They're in a light mood. They're in a feeling, if I can use the word righteous, they're connecting with that light of Francis that was so pure and so godly is the word. And here's the stained glass window at the cathedral. And what we find in the story of St. Francis of Assisi is the story of a man who's raised in a wealthy family, who renounces that wealth after he has, as we discussed earlier, an encounter with a painting. He is praying in the church of San Damiano and in Assisi when the crucifix begins to speak to him and tells him to go rebuild his church. And Francis thinks it's the church of Assisi at San Damiano, but soon learns that it's actually the Catholic Church itself. And this sends Francis then up on a quest of discovery. We're looking right now at paintings from the Church of San Francisco of Mary Magdalene, the Ascension of Mary Magdalene. Here we see the Nolo Me Tangere by Giotto of Mary Magdalene meeting Jesus on Easter morning, greeting the risen Jesus, radiating light. This is Mary Magdalene at San Francisco receiving the cloak of light from the alchemist Zosimu. The creation of Adam, showing him created originally as a perfect light being. So here in Assisi, we see several of the themes that we've been developing. The idea of the cloak of light, the ascension on a cloud, Adam and Eve as light beings originally, made in the image of God, which could well be that Mandelbrot set we just looked at. We see the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. But the focus of our story, of course, is Francis. And this was his home, born and raised there in the latter part of the 12th and early 13th century. And Francis was the person who perhaps more than any other is responsible for our current technological fascination, if you will. Because going back to the late 13th century, there was a mystical Cistercian theologian in Italy named Joachim Fiore, who was inspired by a mystical reading of the book of Revelation in 1190. And he predicted that the second coming of Christ, would occur in 1260. And humanity would enter a new age or millennium and return to perfection. Now, this is really important to our conversation because the Tibetans teach that we become perfect, just like Adam and Eve were perfect, when we attain our rainbow body of light. And so here is this Italian prophet saying that our return to perfection, our return to our original light being status, like Adam and Eve, and just like the Tibetan rainbow body, would occur in 1260. He also prophesied that an order of the just, or spiritually illumined or saintly beings, would rule for a 1,000-year period, like the book of Revelation said. Fiore's twist on this old idea was threefold. One, he said the millennium was coming soon, as opposed to orthodox thinking, which said no one knew when that was going to happen. And two, that human beings can actively prepare for and bring about the millennium, bring about the second coming. And three, he said technology can assist in making this happen. So Fiore dies and in 1202, and his vision is picked up by Francis of Assisi and his followers, who avidly commented on Joachim Fiore's writings, promoted his prophecies that Jesus is coming soon, like now, and according to Christian theologian Paul Tillich, applied these prophecies to Francis of Assisi, saying that he was the second coming of Christ. And this is really incredible because we just looked at Padmasambhava, who was acknowledged as the second Buddha, and now we have this tradition that Francis of Assisi was the second coming of Christ. Now, think about the potential and possibility of that. And this interaction then between Francis as Christ and Clare of Assisi, she then takes on the role of the Magdalene. And this is the recurrence of this archetypal pattern, if you will. Because in fact, according to his biographers, Francis wasn't actually the reincarnation of Jesus. His biographer said he was the reincarnation of John the Baptist. So that means that Francis of Assisi, if he was John the Baptist, was also Elijah of the Old Testament, who in 800 BC ascended into the heavens in a whirlwind. So in Francis of Assisi, in his story, in Clare, we're looking at a reincarnating figure who teaches the secrets of mystic ascension over and over again as his chosen soul's mission. Is it true? I don't have any reason to disprove it, but let's go back to the year 1205. The year of France and northern Italy is thick with the secrets of Jewish and Sufi mysticism that focuses on attaining the light body and ascending to the throne of God. The Cathar heresy of southern France is on the rise, and Francis of Assisi is deeply affected by it. He travels to the Languedoc to study with the Cathar mystics, who believe that they are reincarnations of the Essenes who possess the secret religion of Jesus, which is about our transmutation into light. For Cathars, the Catholic Church represented a strand of Christianity that had gone badly astray in the 4th century. And this is the church that Francis believes the crucifix of Jesus is speaking to him to rebuild. The Cathars saw themselves as true Christians, the church of amour, or love, retaining the Christian beliefs and practices of the early Christian church, which means of the Essenes and Jesus and Mary Magdalene. In this way, they're the mirror image of the Catholic Church, based in Rome or Roma. So this is the Amor v. Roma battle, which didn't go well for the Cathars, because soon after this, Pope Innocent III, who who Francis actually went to ask permission to rebuild the church or to start up the Franciscan branch of the church. It was Innocent III who sent the stormtroopers into the Languedoc and exterminated as many as 1 million men, women, and children Cathars. So little Francis here is duking it out with a major Nazi. Not duking it out, but he's interacting with Innocent III, who goes down in history as an exterminator of the Cathars and an eliminator of the true Christian religion. So Francis is dealing with some pretty dark stuff here as he's trying to bring the light. The Cathars were the pure ones, the good people, and I believe they're of the same spiritual lineage as Padmasambhava, the Essenes, and going all the way back to Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They, in their monasteries in southern France, which Francis would have studied at, described Isaiah's vision of a stairway to heaven and his encounter with the seraphim angel. Isaiah is seen encountering a seraph in this image here. And according to the Cathars, life is a training ground for ascension, and they claimed that they possessed the secret ascension teachings of Jesus. And as I said, they're violently opposed by the Church of Rome and Pope Innocent III. He's trying to eradicate these secrets. So this has opened up some speculation here that maybe Francis of Assisi, when he's amongst the Cathars, is learning their ascension secrets based primarily on the vision of Isaiah and the stairway to heaven in our interaction with the Seraph. I want to make a comment before we go forward that during this time, we also have the story of St. Teresa of Avila, who received the stigmata wounds, the wounds of the crucified Christ, from an image of Christ on the cross. And coming off this painting of the crucifixion, going into the body of St. Teresa of Avila, who's also apparently in an ecstatic trance, although there's no evidence of the alabaster jar here. And we see her receiving the wounds of stigmata on these beams of light coming off a painting. Another example of a sacred painting, a piece of sacred art, transmuting somebody or prompting the transmutation of somebody. This is sort of what Francis of Assisi is describing, is that he encountered one of these talking crucifixes, or he had gone into maybe some level of mind, some kind of a trance. And the crucified Jesus speaks to him and tells him to go rebuild this church. And what I'm establishing here is that this is not an uncommon experience in Catholicism at this time. People are having these types of experience. And so while Francis began by literally repairing the church structures which he found in ruin, we know that Jesus didn't want him to repair the church buildings, but rather he desired for Francis and his order to rebuild the mystical holy church. How do we do this? Well, to rebuild the mystical church, we must become holy, meaning whole, complete, and perfect. And this is what Francis had in mind, was learning how we trigger our mystical body and ascend. And as in the example of Francis, our holiness is a result of our union with Christ in his mystical body. And this is what we're going to show here happen with Francis. In the story, Francis is meditating. He's in his hermitage, and we see these examples in Assisi of Jesus and Mary here with Francis within him. And the next thing we know, that the resurrected Christ has manifested or appeared to Francis, just like he appeared to the disciples numerous times, because the resurrected Jesus has acquired his light body and can phase back and forth between the heavenly realms and the earthly realms. I think the most profound post-ascension appearance of Jesus occurred when he manifested or appeared to Francis of Assisi as a seraph, as a six-winged angel. And as a result of this encounter, Francis is known as Jesus's brother and the second Christ. The title was bequeathed upon Francis when he became the first person to receive the stigmata, the 5 wounds of the crucified Christ. And these were transmitted to Francis 5 as Seraph. Start seeing these paintings, this one by Gaudi in the 14th century, of Christ as a resurrected being, as a seraph, manifesting to Francis of Assisi and beaming to him the 5 wounds of the stigmata. And after this experience, Francis begins to go through the process of ascension. Now, I've been in numerous churches throughout Italy, numerous museums, literally around the world, collecting these images of Francis and Christ as a seraph. I'm just absolutely mesmerized by them. And thinking of the possibility here that once again, as in the example of St. Teresa of Avila and the other art that we looked at, that perhaps these paintings are more than just recollections of this experience. Perhaps these are actual ways that you and I can begin to place ourselves in the position of Francis of Assisi, and through contemplation, meditation, reflection on the love of the Creator, which is what Francis and the Franciscans taught, we too could manifest a vision of Christ before us as a seraph. Francis wasn't the only person to see Christ as a seraph, and this is a bit of research that I'm very, very proud of, because I just happened upon it one day. I was in the Nubian Museum in Aswan, Egypt, and I'm looking at a case, and here's this depiction of what I call Big Bird Jesus. It's Jesus as a seraph. And the Egyptologists debate whether or not this image is from the 4th century or the 10th century. But they're very certain that it was made by an Egyptian Christian in Egypt, which means that somebody either 200 years or 800 years, actually 300 years or 800 years before Francis saw Jesus as a seraph, somebody in Egypt, this artist, also believes they had an encounter with Jesus as a seraphim angel. That's really extraordinary, because we normally don't think of Christ as an angel. But this is what this tradition is saying, is that he in fact is part of the seraphim, the highest order of angels, transformed humans who have achieved the highest possible state of human evolution and transformed themselves into beings of pure light and pure love, and joined these angelic beings that dwell at the throne of God. These seraphim angels are portrayed as red-winged because we're told they burn with the love of the Creator. And according to Renaissance magi, the way that we can become a seraph is by meditating on the love of the Creator. Something that I have shown in my work is that when you see Christ enthroned with the rainbow around him, holding the resurrection stick and the crown, he can match him up very well with Padmasambhava on his throne, his rainbow throne, holding the resurrection stick, the crown of glory, and the Vajra, or the symbol of compassion and action. I believe these images are interchangeable. But that isn't the only way that Christ is portrayed. He's also portrayed in his resurrected form as a seraph. And Francis began his encounter with Christ as a seraph when he saw this painting come alive. And then later, Christ manifests as a rainbow angel to him. And I believe that the seraphim and the rainbow body beings are exactly the same beings. And that when Francis had this encounter with Christ as a seraphim, it kickstarted within him his process of ascension. And it told Francis that he too had the capability of transforming into an angelic being. The key here is that while pouring out his love for Christ, Francis beheld the crucified Christ as a seraph. The scholars refer to this as a moment of seraphic ecstasy. So Francis is not in an ordinary state of mind as he's having this experience. And once again, I wonder if there was some substance, be it a hallucinogen or maybe triggered by meditation, a substance that came from within his own consciousness, within his brain, secreted from the pineal gland probably, that put him in this ecstatic state of consciousness where he could perceive this otherworldly being, Christ, as an angel. But the point is that Francis is in seraphic ecstasy. And it's in this ecstatic state that he then not only perceives Christ as a seraphim angel, but also receives the wounds of stigmata and 5 rays of light that burn into his flesh. Francis's biographer, Bonaventure of Bagnoregio, writing in the Major Legend of St. Francis, said that through the stigmata, the true love of Christ transformed the lover into his image. So through the rays coming off this seraphim angel, Christ, the true love of Christ transformed Francis into his image. Now here's where we're getting into this kind of mirror world that this line of thinking enters you into, because our soul is a reflection of God, right? And so Francis is going to this deep state of love, so deep that he's reflecting back to Christ that love. And the image of Christ is then transforming Francis into the purest love possible. It's pretty deep. When the vision disappeared, writes Bonaventure, Francis was left with a marvelous ardor in his heart. So his heart is transformed by this experience. And at the same time, there were imprinted on his body markings that were no less marvelous, says Bonaventure. These markings were the stigmata, and after receiving the stigmata, Francis became known as the second Christ. So these scenes of Francis with the open book, with the skull, the same skull as Mary Magdalene is seen with, receiving the wounds of the stigmata, are really insightful for us, because they talk about us going into this deep state of ecstatic wonderment through just the meditation on the love of the Creator. And it opens us up into this, it's like opening a portal into another worldly realm where we can perceive Christ as a seraph, who then can transmit to us through beams of light into our body the divine light that will begin to transmute our body into light to match the frequency of the resurrected Christ. This is what I see going on in these images based on my understanding of Francis's experience here. And so this is why, as I say again, I've gone to such lengths to try to collect as many of these images as possible. This is San Marco in, Santa Croce in Florence, in Gotti's painting here of Christ on the Tree of Life. And it's on this same wall where we see Francis receiving the stigmata. I can't get enough of these images, and I hope you enjoy them as well. I realize for a lot of people seeing these for the first time, as many are when they see my presentations, that it's kind of off-putting to see Christ as a seraph angel. But this could well be the way that the Christ phases back and forth as a resurrected being, and can in fact manifest in our consciousness as well to translate or transmit the vibration of the light body into our hands, so that then we too can ascend as well. So this is a really important ascension story that we're walking through here. And again, we're looking at the possibility that Francis is the reincarnation of John the Baptist. So he would have been training as an Essene for this moment. And in future presentations, I'll be going into much more detail about my recent research, actually ongoing research for the past few years, but it's kind of all coming together in my book that will be out this fall, about how the Essenes, led by their initiator, John the Baptist, were actually recovering these ancient light body teachings, and were actually interacting with angels. And the angels that they would have been interacting with are the Seraphim. That according to the Essenes themselves. And so it's perfectly natural then for Jesus as an Essene to receive their light body teachings, go completely through it in this process of ascension and resurrection, and then show up 1,200 years later in Earth time to his initiator, John the Baptist, who's shown here in the middle panel of this triptych, and kind of return the favor, if you will. And perhaps, again, this light body form is how these resurrected beings travel. So we can just imagine that the Essenes during Jesus and Mary Magdalene's time, who were interacting with these angels, would have perceived something quite similar to what we're seeing Francis see here. They would have gone into these ecstatic states like Mary Magdalene did. And those cute little cherubs that were taking Mary Magdalene into the heavens on her clouds during her ascension were also these seraphim. That's my conclusion. And it's supported, again, not just by the story of Francis, but also my deep research into the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essenes, who were describing their encounters with these beings and their transformation into beings of light. Like Francis, the Essenes were obsessed with purity. They were oppressed, they were oppressed, that's for sure. They were exterminated by Rome, but they were also obsessed not only with purity, but also with compassion and being beings of pure light and pure love that would elevate them to the level of the seraphim. So most Franciscans know the story of Francis, and when Pope, the newly elected Pope a couple years ago took the name Francis, I was really thinking, okay, we're going to start to see a revival in the images of Christ as a seraph, because that is the key experience of Francis of Assisi, but today it hasn't happened. So that's what we're doing here, though, is going back and looking at this important story of Francis raising his level of vibration, connecting with Christ through this painting, and then receiving this initiation from Christ as a seraph. I love this depiction here by Bartholomew Carducci. Francis is lifted off the ground in a shaft or pillar of light emanating from an opening in the heavens in which Christ as a fiery seraphim hovers. This gives new definition to the term "beam me up, Scotty," right? Remember what we saw a moment ago and the ascension of Mary Magdalene, the ecstasy of Mary Magdalene. She goes into ecstasy. She too sees the shaft of light. And I equated that shaft of light with the same rays coming from the Atan in the ancient Egyptian images of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I think that what Francis is perceiving is not an earthly light. He's perceiving an otherworldly light by going into this ecstatic trance. And this enables him to open a portal or gate in heaven through which Christ can then manifest. This is an extraordinary engraving from 1628. It's from Spain, and we see the story of Christ and Francis merge into one. The two halves of their lives unite in the hybrid being, the seraph, in the center of the image. Now, one needs to analyze their own heart and what happens to their heart when they truly love something or someone to comprehend the statement that is also represented here, that the true love of Christ transformed the lover into his image. So what this is saying is that Christ's true image is a seraph. And I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can get my Rainbow Body webinar from PortalToAscension, or you can go to my website and order my flash drive that also has that webinar on it, along with my 18 books and several other video presentations where I make the solid connection between the rainbow body of Padmasambhava and the light body of the Seraph to say that they're the same thing. But what I'm going to here is that Francis is said to be not just the second coming of Christ or John the Baptist, but the first coming of the next human. Be a hybrid being. Some people believe that we will mesh our flesh with technology and that we will create a new hybrid being. But I believe that the next hybrid being is a human angel being, modeled after Francis of Assisi's experience with Christ as a seraph. And so here is this kind of bizarre looking Spanish image of Francis as a hybrid angel human. It's wild, wild, wild. So could it be possible that Francis really is John the Baptist reincarnated and now receives the initiation from Christ? I just want to show you this right quick. This is images that show Francis receiving his cloak of light in the desert, and then receiving, as Francis of Assisi, receiving the stigmata wounds from Christ as a seraph. Often these paintings are side by side. And the reason why is because it shows that these are the same person. It's like a cartoon. Here's our past life, here's our present life. And in the future life, we're to imagine that Francis is now a seraph himself and maybe seeking out individuals such as us who are raising our vibration, our understanding of these teachings, so that we too can receive the final seal, which is what we're told Francis received from Christ as a seraph. He received the final seal. And that final seal is actually our light body. And so by raising ourselves to this level of understanding, we're placing ourselves on the path of understanding. I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides here because I want to get back to these here. Because Francis and Claire, as we'll discuss here, are now two more models of this pathway to ascension. And it's very clear that part of this process of ascension involves ecstasy, not the party drug, but accessing a level of mind of trance where our soul can leave the body and can interact with these higher dimensional realms. And part of this, as I discussed earlier, I think is our realization that our soul is a jewel on Indra's net. And that reflected in that our soul reflects all the souls of the universe. So therefore, our soul can do what Francis's soul did, what Mary Nefertiti, all these other figures we've been discussing today. So look at this painting here by Bellini of Francis in ecstasy. He locks on to the opening in the heavens in the upper left. And this is kind of what drives my work too, is to help initiates, researchers, questers such as yourself to say, hey, it's okay to pierce the veil. It's okay to go beyond the 3D world, because all the good stuff happens beyond the 3D world, right? And over and again, from Amarna and Nefertiti, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Padmasambhava, Yeshishogyo, now Francis, they're trying to get us to go inward, to open something, pathways in our consciousness that enable us to see the openings in the heavens. So I put a yellow beam here to show the direction of his attention. And now in the detail here, we see Francis, he's got that book and skull, as he often does in these paintings, because that's the same skull that we see possessed by Mary Magdalene as well. And his attention is drawn into the open heavens up in the left-hand corner, which is what we're going to see. Bellini captures Francis in the state of being beside oneself or wrapped out of oneself. This is rapture, okay? A state in which the mind is elevated above the reach of ordinary impressions is when under the influence of overpowering emotion, in this case, love Francis apparently was able to activate his heart chakra to such an extent that he manifested this image of Christ as a seraph. Or through the influence of extraordinary elevation of the spirit, as when the soul, unconscious of sensible objects, is supposed to contemplate heavenly mysteries as indicated by the opening in heaven above. So Francis becomes a real role model for our connection with all that is and our ability to connect with these other dimensional realms by opening up the heart. Well, let's compare him with Mary Magdalene in ecstasy. This is, again, the ascension of Mary Magdalene. She, I think, maybe is imbibed a liquid, a substance, an oil from the alabaster jar, and now she's in this ecstatic state. It doesn't mean she's hallucinating, it just means she's gone into a deep state of reverie, and could even be a deep state of love, where now she can perceive this shaft of light coming down from the upper right of the painting. It's always there, just awaiting our opening of our consciousness. Again, in Francis's model of opening up the heart and going to this deep state of love, or perhaps through the use of substances, and oil perhaps. Caravaggio's Magdalene in ecstasy. They're extraordinary images, and they're fun to contemplate because you just ask yourself, what does it feel like to be in that kind of ecstasy, that kind of state, sort of deep love and emotion. Ecstasy, and here is Francis again, is described as an intensely emotional state in which rational thought and self-control are absent. What can prompt you to go into that deep state of emotion, of reverie? What do we need to do to open the heart, to unlock our consciousness in this way? There's individual tips and techniques that all of us need to kind of raise our comfort level to. But what this is encouraging us to do is to find that pathway. And here we see the opening of heaven and these lines of light by Francis here. There's an angel here to support him. With one eye open, the saint seems to see something that's hidden from us. And what he's seeing is that the hidden light, the light beyond light, and that hidden light, Akhenaten called The Atan. It's the light that illuminates the sun and can only be seen with our inner vision. And so Francis is leading the way for us to go inward and to connect, open these pathways. And again, my practice, one of my practices anyway, my primary practice is the visual pathways, this artwork, to link with what Francis is seeing, feeling, experiencing, knowing that as his neocortex is firing in the painting, so is mine. My consciousness is trying to experience exactly the same thing. And what I need to do is to figure out how to take the brakes off, so to speak, so that my consciousness can experience exactly what Francis is doing. And I know neurologically or neuroscientifically speaking that the barrier that keeps me from experiencing exactly what Francis is experiencing here is my skin barrier. And there are neurons in the neocortex that says that experience is not happening to you, but it can. And what I need to do is to find a way to open up those pathways so that I can experience that too. As I said earlier, Francis is gazing at an inner sky here. He's in ecstasy, which is, as I said, a late 14th century word meaning in a frenzy, stupor, or excited. It relates to entrancement. And I hope that what I've been doing these past few hours, is entrancing you with these images. And that they could be perhaps an entrance for you to enter into these paintings as altars that alter your consciousness, and to help get you excited about taking this next step and following the pathways of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, Jesus, Magdalene, Padmasambhava, Yeshishogyo, Francis, and also, as we'll see here, Claire as well. And to recognize that all of these way showers are talking about the same thing, and access to our soul as a reflection of the love of God. And that's all we really have to do to get to the next step, I think, is to realize the power of our soul. And then after that, that's what starts to open us up to the experiences, to the people, to the books, the places, the works of art that we need to take ourselves to that next level. And so what a wonderful way for this to occur. Art as a way to take the dust off our soul, to help us to polish our diamond and say, yeah, I'm excited about this. I want to follow this path. I want to have this experience of Christ as an illuminated being manifest before me. That's what it's all about. And so we'll follow the path of Francis and maybe go to Assisi. Claire and I are planning future trips to Assisi in 2017. We love taking people to this sacred place and tapping into the story of Francis of Assisi and Claire of Assisi, walking in these footsteps and gazing into the heavens from the same places where they meditated. We take you to the actual hermitage of Francis of Assisi, where he had his experience with Christ as a seraph, where Francis and Claire meditated. Here's a favorite statue of Francis in the Stargate, and me back in 2010 following him along that path through the Stargate. Really wonderful experience. So let's bring in the Claire piece just for a moment before we close out here. She too, like Francis, was raised in a wealthy family. And after hearing Francis preach the first time, she escaped an arranged marriage and devoted herself to contemplative life in imitation of Jesus. And when she was just 18, she left her home and joined Francis and his friars and joined the Franciscan movement. This is Claire of Assisi received by Francis in this painting by Belluneri. And it's a wonderful testament to the energetic exchange that we're talking about here between these two. They're the archetypal divine masculine and divine feminine, although they weren't married like Francis, but rather like Akhenaten and Nefertiti, like Jesus and Mary Magdalene. They in every way did exemplify the divine couple, the immortal couple, because without Claire, Francis would not be able to fulfill the mission that was bequeathed on him when he received the stigmata from Christ as a seraph. St. Claire, here shown by Simone Martini, founded the Order of the Poor Ladies, a monastic religious order for women in the Franciscan tradition, and wrote their Rule of Life. Following her death, she was given the sainthood, and the Order of St. Claire was founded. They're also called the Poor Clares. And there are wonderful writings attributed to Claire of Assisi that you can still get today, and I highly recommend that people that want to tap into this aspect of the Claire and Francis story to get a hold of her writings and follow her path of actually renunciation of leaving behind all this material and focus on, like Michelangelo with the block of marble, removing all of the material aspects of life and getting into the core of the soul. This is what their story is ultimately all about, is recognizing that our soul growth is what really matters. It's why we incarnated in our physical form. Not to dwell on the material, as fun as that can be, but rather to get into the immaterial world, to get into our trance states, to follow the path of ecstasy and open our consciousness into the openings in the holes in space that are all around us right now. So we're looking at the Basilica of St. Clare in Assisi, really special place when we visit there, and various depictions here from in that basilica. One of my favorites is this one here. It's actually from the Franciscan Monastery of the Holy Land in Washington, D.C. And we see Francis and Clare on either side of the enthroned Christ, and he appears to be in some kind of a radiant gateway or portal, stargate, coming through the sun, manifesting before them. This is one I can't wait to visit. It's in New York City. I haven't seen it in person, but it's a mind-blowing image that ties together several of our themes here of Francis and Clare on either side of an open portal or gateway with Christ emerging from the cloud. Just a magnificent image of Stargate metaphysics, which ultimately is what all of this is about, is our transformation of our consciousness so that we can link with these avatars, gurus, angels, and ultimately follow them into the heavenly realms. At the Church of St. Francis of San Francisco in Assisi, we see Francis ascending on a cloud of light as the second Christ. So within that church is encoded all of this ascension mythology that goes all the way back actually to the Essenes. Because when angels are taking a soul in an orb of light such as this is actually the Merkaba, the throne chariot that the Essenes spoke of, that was developed from within our own consciousness. And so here's Francis ascending into the heavenly realms on his Merkaba cloud, showing us that he has gone through this whole process of connecting with Christ as a seraph and then ultimately ascending himself. This next image is really provocative and very profound to me. It's from San Damiano in Assisi, Italy, and it shows the crucifixion of Christ with Francis present at the crucifixion, receiving a ray of light, a beam of light from the mouth of Christ into his mouth. I'll kind of leave this one up to you to interpret any way you want, but to me, it suggests that Francis received the impulse of light of the resurrected Christ through this painting. And once again, it's another one of these open eye meditations where we can place ourselves in the place of Francis and receive this light of illumination on the shaft of light. We have to know or assume that Francis is in a state of ecstasy and that he is seeing this otherworldly light. When most people look at an image of the crucifixion, they're seeing the suffering of Christ, not Francis. Francis is connecting with the love of Christ. And as a consequence, when you follow the path of love, not the path of Roma, of suffering, you will see Christ as an illuminated light being who can transmit the light or vibration of our light being self, even through a painting. And that's what I see going on here in this remarkable image. Perhaps the most mind-blowing image to me of Francis and in Assisi are these images where he's enthroned like Christ on a cloud and surrounded by the red-winged seraphim. I mean, this again tells me that Francis of Assisi has completed his ascension and that he is now an ascended being, and like the seraphim is capable of phasing back and forth between the material world and the immaterial world. And he is enthroned as Christ. And as the Bible describes, the throne of Christ is surrounded by the seraphim, and there they are on either side of the throne of Francis in the celestial realms. This is extraordinary mythology. It's extraordinary history, because we're talking about a human being who existed in the 13th century that did what all of us would dearly love to be able to do, to connect with the resurrected Christ and transform. Now, here's my unique piece again in this whole puzzle. When I'm looking at Francis enthroned, holding the resurrection stick in his hand, and sitting on the cloud, I'm saying that is exactly the same as Padmasambhava on his lotus throne with his resurrection stick. I believe that Francis, as an enthroned being, has attained the same level of light body as what Padmasambhava has attained with the rainbow body of light. There is no Franciscan teacher that says this. There's no Tibetan teacher that says this. This is just my supposition here. This is what I'm taking from this imagery, and knowing that the seraphim and the rainbow body beings are the same, and that Francis has become a light being. He must have attained the great perfection. This is also Francis in glory, also at San Francisco and Assisi. Whereas we come in here, we see these surrounded by angels and heavenly beings. He's a radiant light being, holding the book, holding the resurrection stick. And once again, I'm suggesting that he is not only the second Christ, as he's portrayed here, but he is also portrayed as a resurrected light being, just like Padmasambhava. The imagery, the symbolism, the meaning, the intention is all interchangeable. And so if the Tibetans are telling me, as they do, that I can attain, well, let me rephrase, that I can begin to program my body to attain the light body by contemplating, meditating, and reflecting on images of Padmasambhava as a guru in his light body, and that he, as a guru, an avatar, can come through the painting, through an energy field created by the painting, and begin to transform me through the power of the light coming off of this painting, then I'm supposing that Francis of Assisi, or images of Francis of Assisi, can do the same thing, because he too is at this same level of manifestation. And remember, his story began when a painting of the crucified Jesus spoke to him. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that these images of the rainbow body and the light body are methods of transmission. And here at Assisi, we see Francis on his chariot of light, just like Elijah, just like John the Baptist, ascending into the heavens. And then Francis then appears on a chariot of fire to his disciples, meaning they're in ecstasy and have opened up their consciousness and are perceiving him as a light being. In closing, I would like to reference the Sacred Heart of Christ, because this is going to take us to a practice, something that we can actually do, how we can take everything we've been discussing these past few hours and put it into a practice. The devotion of the Sacred Heart, often known as the most Sacred Heart of Jesus, is one of the most widely practiced and well-known Roman Catholic devotions. Taking Jesus Christ's physical heart as the representation of his divine love for humanity. The Sacred Heart is often depicted in Christian art as a flaming heart shining with divine light, pierced by the lance wound of the crucifixion, encircled by the crown of thorns, and surmounted by a cross and bleeding light. Sometimes the image is shown shining within the chest or bosom of Christ, with his wounded hands pointing at the heart. The wounds and the crown of thorns allude to the manner of Christ's death, while the fire represents the transformative power of divine love. And that's the point I'm wanting to get to, is that as Akhenaten said, the divine light of the Lord, of the Atan or the Atan, the Lord Christ, be transmitted through a work of art? And the answer is, yes, it can. This is why he ripped the roofs off the temples and said, here, all you need is this tablet in your altar of Nefertiti and I transmitting this divine light. Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as we have shown, or in the case of Jesus anyway, transmitted this divine light, the divine love, through a painting. Padmasambhava and the Tibetan rainbow body tradition teaches that as a guru, his divine light and divine love can be transmitted through a painting of the rainbow body. Francis of Assisi saw or had a painting of the crucified Jesus speak to him and sent him off on his mission. So the answer is yes, the divine love of the Lord Creator, whatever term you want to put on it, can, according to the Franciscans and the painters of the Renaissance, be transmitted through a painting. And so I'm encouraging you to begin to incorporate some of this sacred art. Maybe the images of Amarna and Nefertiti with the Atan. Maybe images of Mary Magdalene in ecstasy. Maybe images of Francis receiving the stigmata wounds. Maybe images of Padmasambhava through in the rainbow body. Begin to incorporate those in your yoga, in your sacred practice. Put them on your refrigerator. Put them on your cell phone. Put them on your desktop. Use these as contemplative ways of accessing these other dimensional realms. This is why all Franciscans, and by Franciscans are not just followers of Francis of Assisi. I define Franciscans as those on the path of ascension, are encouraged to enthrone a picture or statue of the Sacred Heart of Jesus in a prominent place in their home and pray the act of consecration to the Sacred Heart. By this enthronement, they recognize Christ's rule over their lives, which some people don't want to do that, but they do want to open their hearts to his divine light. This is yet another example of art being used to transmit a holy vibration from heart to heart. So here's an example of Clare of Assisi praying to Christ with an open heart, the radiant light heart with Francis beside him. And here we see it in the detail. So my summation here is that this Sacred Heart devotion is a summary of all religion, actually, not just the Catholic religion, but all religion of those who seek to live a more perfect life. And by perfect life in the Tibetan tradition means that you will attain the perfect light body. The Cathars sought to become the perfecti, the perfect ones. The Gnostic Gospels speak of the immovable race of perfect light humans. The perfect human is an illuminated being, but the perfect human is also a being of light and love. And as we begin to connect with these images, we too can begin to our path of perfection, or to enhance our path of perfection, whether we follow the Cathar path or the Tibetan path. So in closing, I'm asking you to meditate on these images here of the radiant light of Christ. And here comes the phone ringing at the perfect time to kind of tell us that maybe this is a confirmation.
Call from Alice.
And I'm just going to do that. That we can make the call. We can open our hearts. We can connect with the divine realms through our open heart. So in just the moments that we finish here together, let's just open our hearts together to this image. And if the image of the radiant Christ isn't comfortable for you, think of this as the image of the universal light teacher, the universal avatar, that this is the hero, the Christ with 1,000 faces, whether it's Padmasambhava, Amarna and Nefertiti, Mary Magdalene, all of their faces are interchangeable here. And what we're simply wanting to do is to open our hearts to this divine light and love and ask that it fill our being with the highest possible vibration here together. And that as we leave this presentation, we do so recognizing that our soul truly is a reflection of God. And that as our soul reflects this light of love into the world, that it will be reflected in all the souls that we come into contact with in our daily lives. And as each soul begins to reflect this divine light and love, this is how we will begin to transform our world. So I admire your strength. I admire your courage, your tenacity on your path. And I encourage you to continue. And I hope that what we have discussed today will bring some new light, some new inspiration, some new courage into your life. Our path is the path of the brave. We are all really, truly brave hearts on this path of ascension, because ultimately it takes a lot of strength. But the strength that we have is in numbers. When the Essenes talked about their community, they had an expression, the Yahad, which meant the many. That as we go forward on this path of ascension, we recognize that out of the many, we become one. And that is our goal here, that oneness with ourselves, with our Creator, with the light of love. And so I want to thank you from the deepest part of my heart for spending this time together. I'm truly grateful for this time, and I look forward to the next time we get together. And I want to thank Neil and everybody at PortalToAscension for making this event happen. God bless you all on your path, and thank you very much. I'll see you again soon.